for the last 2 years, and those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometers have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and good morning, and I do apologise for sounding like I do. I can't help it. I woke up this way. I wasn't born this way though, so hopefully it won't last very long. But if you can tolerate my croaky sounding voice, I will keep you company for the next 3 hours, bringing you all the latest from the newspapers with a host of fantastic guests. There is much to look forward to on the eve of Christmas Eve. And if you would like to give my little voice a bit of respite, I would much appreciate it today, more than ever, as you can no doubt tell. So do be brave and give me a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. It's your normal network rate. You'll be doing a girl a huge favour, especially if I start to sort of wheeze and cough. 8722 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. Write the word talk before you text. You can also send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 0344 499 1000 is the number for that as well. It doubles up as both the number to call and the number on the WhatsApp. We can shorten it to WAP if you like, why not? OK, shall we kick off? Because I'm going to let all my guests do all the talking today for obvious reasons, and I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by one of my absolute favourites next. It is the glorious Baba-in-Chief James Price, former government special advisor. Good morning, James.
Good morning, my friend. I love this Rod Stewart impression that you're doing just ahead of Christmas. It's fantastic.
Is that what it is? Do you reckon if they were sort of like doing a remake of All for One, you know, the three gravelly voices of Bryan Adams, Rod Stewart, and who was the other one on that?
Sting, I think. Yeah.
That's right. That they'd call me up as a backing vocalist.
There's a great story where Margaret Thatcher was on the radio one year, and one of her advisors afterwards said, "Oh, Margaret, have you got a slight cold or something? You sounded very sexy." And apparently she replied, "I don't need a cold to sound sexy, dear." It's probably apocryphal, but I love the story.
I'm not sure this sounds sexy. I mean, I don't think I would want to get anywhere near me right now. I sound like a walking car crash, and frankly, I am. So save me, will you? And talk to me about, let's talk about housing migrants in barracks, shall we? Because this sort of goes to Crowborough, where they are trying to prevent the 540 male asylum seekers being put into the barracks there in East Sussex. And they're not really having much luck. Understandably, no one does. You know, forget it, Epping Forest, forget it, Crowborough. We will do what we like and put these men where we like. But this is going to have a huge impact on the local community.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think this is the problem that the government is now starting to see, that you can't house people in these areas, any areas now, and keep it quiet, not least because there's now a lot more attention and scrutiny from local communities about these hotels, or whether it be barracks or other sites as well. But also because now local communities are organising to stop them. They see the damaging effects and the potential damaging effects of housing large numbers of mostly men, mostly of fighting age, and mostly from third world cultures. We don't know anything about any of these people, and we see lots of stories increasingly in the news now, either of really horrendous incidents or even just low-level crimes committed by these people, the defense of which is, oh, well, they didn't know that it was wrong. And so people don't like this stuff happening. And when we have a kind of failure of state capacity to stop these people coming over, we're starting to see small signs of communities organising independently of the state, whether it's police or anything else, to try and do this. I think it's Crowborough where a man called Nick Jones, I believe, is organised, and now others have joined, something called Crowborough Patrol, which is a group of individuals wandering around, say, at the times when children go to school and come back from school, to try and make sure that the area stays safe. Now, I don't know specifically about Crowborough what the crime stats are like or the likelihood of any of these things. The mere fact that people are both scared enough by these sorts of impositions of people from asylum seekers coming into their communities to start organising like this is very sad. But it also is the first worrying signs that people will start feeling that they might need to start taking the law into their own hands. And that's a very, very worrying thing. To be clear, I don't want that to happen. I don't think anybody should want that to happen. But when people start to feel that the state has not got their back and is housing these people, we don't know where they're from, we don't know anything about them, and we see stories that similar people to them are committing heinous crimes, it is unfortunately an understandable reaction that people may start organising in this way, both to prevent the migrants coming in, or the asylum seekers, I should say, coming in, and once they're there, to try and keep their communities safe.
No, indeed, and I worry for the same, quite frankly, because, you know, the numbers keep going up and up and up. Crossings have topped 41,000 this year. No doubt we'll see the same next year and the year after and the year after, because for whatever reason, and this is what I don't understand, I am utterly convinced that the government can pull a lever if they wanted, declare a national emergency and stop this tomorrow. They could. They could have adopted the Conservatives' Rwanda plan, which was just beginning to materialise rather than bin it. They knew they were not going to be able to smash the gangs. That was always going to be for the birds. They could follow in the footsteps of Poland. They could follow in the footsteps of Hungary and just say, we're not open for asylum seekers. It isn't going to happen anymore. I'm sure there are plenty of things the government could do, because it should be in the power of the sovereign state to determine matters like this. So why is it that they're not doing it? I don't understand. They can see tensions rising. They can see the impact on the economy. They must be able to lick their fingers, put it in the air and see which direction the wind is blowing, and the real risk that there is going to be some sort of conflagration as public sentiment runs at an all-time low regarding this issue. So why is it they refuse to do something, James?
It's exactly the right question, Alex, and I'm sure that everybody listening and watching at home or at work are wondering exactly this. There's two parts to it that I think that be useful to kind of unpack here. The first is the fact that even if you think that all politicians are self-interested, corrupt little money grubbers and all the rest of it, which I don't think they are, by the way, they're certainly not money grubbers. There's no bloody money in politics in the UK. But even if you think they're totally self-interested and where therefore all they would care about is being re-elected and staying in their jobs, they would act very differently to the way that they're acting. So either some of them genuinely think that it's good to flood the country with these people, and I don't even think that's the case in in most instances, not most regular Labour MPs, some of the loony ones who've been brainwashed by NGOs perhaps, but I think it's more the fact that the incentives that are weighing on them from those loony NGOs and fake charities and all the rest of it, and those sorts of pressures, are forcing them to act against their own survival in Parliament and their own instincts to do that. And it's that kind of apparatus that is forcing them to behave this way. To take that apparatus, then the second point is why it's been so difficult for this government and for the Conservatives before to deal with this issue. Same thing. It is the structural makeup of the way, I would maybe call it the blob, other people would just call it the administrative state, the kind of permanent bureaucracy that is not just the civil service, it's the quangos, it's the regulators, it's all the external courts as well, the European Court on Human Rights, which has a powerful impact in the UK because Tony Blair ported it into domestic UK law. So it's not just enough to leave that court. We have to change all the laws that make reference to it, and now the case law and all the rest, blah, blah, blah. The point is there is this huge superstructure of unelected people who are weighing down on the Labour MPs themselves, not letting it work, and tying the hands of the elected government from doing this stuff. I'll finish with this. Dominic Cummings made this very clear. He brought in, when he was running the show in Downing Street under Boris Johnson, he brought in all the heads of special forces, heads of the army and the navy and all the rest of it. He said, right, what do we do about this? They said, well, it's pitifully easy. We've got, still a great big navy, and the English Channel has protected us from the Spanish Armada and from Napoleon and from Hitler and all the rest. It would be very simple for us to stop these small boats coming physically by force, and we could send special forces and work with French special forces to say to the gang leaders, who are in this to make a profit more than anything else, we will capture or kill you if you continue doing this. So the disincentives are there. Why do they not do it? Because of this superstructure of charities and NGOs and, crucially, lawyers, the human rights lawyers, and the law prevents them from being able to.
I was thinking about this earlier today. I was in some sort of like bath time reverie listening to my Bible app, and it was talking, it's the Old Testament, you always get the good stuff down the OT, don't you? And it was talking about the displacement of the Israelites and so on and so forth. And I was thinking about, great sins that have been committed against countries by their rulers. And I'm certain, I sat there and I thought to myself, I am certain in about 10, 20, 30 years' time, when we look back upon this era, when we reflect upon this decade, when our country has changed to become something totally unrecognisable, when we're divided, when we're riven with civil unrest, when our towns and cities no longer look like they used to, and when it becomes clearly apparent that a succession of governments have essentially willfully allowed our country to be invaded and destroyed. We all know that these are not genuine asylum seekers. There may be genuine asylum seekers among the hordes, but by and large they are not. We know that when we've got data coming out on the makeup of people on those boats, when they're coming from Albania and the Punjab, even if they're coming from Syria, quite frankly, and a lot of these people go back home on holiday to these places they're purportedly fleeing persecution from. It's clear to anybody with half a brain cell that these people are not genuine asylum seekers because, we can repeat this ad nauseum, they've come through multiple safe countries. When we look back on this period of time and see what they have done to our Britain, our country, against our wishes, in a way that's going to be incredibly hard to revoke, I think it will go down as a very, very poor chapter in history. And do you know what? All the people who could have done something, are they going to be held accountable? No. That's what's chilling.
What you presented there is, in the spirit of Christmas cheer, the kind of ghost of Christmas future if we're not careful. But I'm a bit more confident that come the next election, whether it's a Conservative majority, a Reform majority, a coalition of the two, or something like that, that they will get in and they will have radical and useful and effective policies to halt all of this. The United States has suffered the same thing under the Biden administration, where that southern border was totally open and they had extraordinary numbers. You're talking 20 million people in 4 years flooding over that border, and the Trump administration stopped it like that. Yeah. It was very, very simple to do, right? We've been able to build walls for quite a while, it turns out. And they've had millions of people self-deport, as in, they leave the country before they get caught and are forcibly removed, alongside the forcible deportation negotiations and all the rest of it. And we are able to learn, I think, from the American example, what works, what doesn't work, messaging that works, all the rest of it. So I'm a lot more confident that we can fix some of this. But you are right that if we don't, then the effects on the country are going to be so damaging that they will be felt for a very long time. We're already seeing statistics that for every asylum seeker that comes over, they are a massive net drain on the exchequer. For every person that comes over, it kind of cuts out a median lifetime's taxes spent. So if you're someone listening right now, your whole life being spent paying taxes, maybe half of what you make, paying tax on every purchase through VAT, every bit of insurance that you pay for, doing the right thing to be insured, every flight you ever take, every pint of beer that you chug over Christmas, all the taxes that you pay over your whole life will be totally negated by one of these people. So I hope that doesn't disappoint people too much.
No,
but the last thing I'll say on this is that you think about something like the First World War. No one really wanted to go into that. Everybody wanted to avoid it, and yet it happened anyway through that kind of inexorable slide. And I think that's a useful frame of analysis to think about the kind of migrant crisis we've got ourselves into now, which is why we've got to break that sort of superstructure of charities and lawyers and all the rest of it if we're going to stop the boats and make any progress on getting Britain back on the right course.
Now, you mentioned the ghosts of Christmas future. Let's talk about the ghosts of Christmas past, shall we? And you mentioned the First World War, and I levelled to you the Second World War, which 80 million people died in those two world wars. 80 million lives lost, sacrificed. Why? For the defence of the nation state. And I thought that we'd got that back. I thought when people voted for Brexit, it was a totemic, seismic indication from the public that we didn't want to be part of some dictatorial global socialism, which just felt like a heavy coat to have to wear, a burden that the British would not bear. And now we find the resurrection of the entire Brexit debate and the divisiveness that it brought, because Wes Streeting, who seems to be on manoeuvres to try and replace Sir Keir Starmer, has decided he wants us to go back into the customs union. Has he been on the Kool-Aid?
Maybe he's been on the eggnog or something. They always say, you know, beware a young man in a hurry. And the fact is that poor Wes Streeting is almost certainly going to lose his parliamentary seat at the next general election. He almost lost it to sort of soft Islamist Gaza candidates the last time round. It's almost certainly going to happen to him this time round. And if he's got any hope, because I'm not sure there's ever going to be a Labour government after this one, of his dream job of being Prime Minister, he's got to move fast and kick useless Keir Starmer out now. But if that's the plan, to me, he seems to be going about it a slightly wrong way. I understand that the remaining Labour supporters and people on the left are all mad Ramonas, but he's managed to make Keir Starmer look vaguely statesmanlike. Starmer, of course, who was the shadow Brexit secretary, who kept pushing Corbyn to try and go for a second referendum, nevertheless has a better, more rounded understanding of our position in the world than Wes Streeting or that idiot photo opportunity Sir Ed Davey, who's also calling for this. And why is that? Well, it's because at the moment we don't have any tariffs with the European Union. We've got to deal with them. There are no tariffs between the UK and the European Union. And on top of that, we've got trade deals with countries all around the world that are better than the trade deals that the EU has. We've got it with America, and we can always improve that because we've got the most pro-British administration, maybe in American history, in the White House at the moment. We've got deals with Japan that are much better than the EU. We've got great deals with our old friends in the Dominions in Australia. We'll get them in New Zealand and Canada and all these places as well. If we were to rejoin the customs union, we would lose all of that to almost no gain whatsoever. And why, therefore, does Streeting want to do that? Because he wants to inch towards rejoining the European Union. And if we were ever to do that, can you imagine how bad the terms in which it would be?
I never understood why people out there are still so sort of motivated by this, because it's very clear the sky didn't fall down after Brexit. When you look at, yes, we have economic turmoil, but that's nothing to do with us leaving the EU. And I just think people must be utterly moronic. You know, people who want open borders, people who want us to be governed by Brussels, people who want us to forego having independent sovereign negotiations, bespoke business deals that suit our own economy. I despair sometimes. Talking about despair, Palestine Action hunger strikers could face brain damage. 2 of 6 prisoners have refused food for 51 days. A third bird has not eaten for 50 days. I mean, people are getting in a lather about this, saying it's terrible, there's got to be intervention, we must listen to what they're demanding before they top themselves to not eating. And I'm like, well, do you know what? They're in prison for a reason. And if you suddenly turn around and cave into hunger strikers in prison, it sets such a dangerous precedent. The fact that these people are making demands on behalf of the British public, quite frankly, regarding our foreign policy, demands that I certainly don't agree with, and are trying to emotionally blackmail politicians by refusing to eat, I just can't seem to generate an iota of sympathy for them. I'm sorry, I don't know if that makes me callous. I think what they're doing is quite disgusting, frankly speaking, but also, once again, moronic. I don't understand why people are getting, why they got in such a lather about Brexit, why they get into such a lather about open borders, why they get in such a lather about the fact that we sell, occasionally the odd widgets to Israel. It's just, what's going on inside their heads, for crying out loud?
I think that's probably the right question to ask. And I've gone through waves of this. It would, of course, be unchristian of me to make a joke about them already exhibiting signs of not terribly impressive brains, given some of the views that they hold. But the United Kingdom doesn't negotiate with terrorists abroad. Why should it negotiate with terrorists in Britain? And Palestine Action has been labelled, quite rightly, as a terrorist organisation. It's proscribed. It's illegal to be a member of it. And there are people who are on trial right now for allegedly attacking police officers and breaking a female police officer's spine with a sledgehammer with multiple blows. They've gone allegedly and damaged RAF jets and things like that as well. We don't negotiate with these people. But I've gone through the phase of being very, very angry with all of them. And I am now going to try and empathise ever so slightly, because one of these people who had a perfectly nice middle-class name has now described that I think she's got a different name she's made up for herself, and she says that she goes by they, them pronouns, and said that they won't do certain things in the prison because they are boycotting any products that might be connected to Israel and all. And you just think, actually, this is someone who has been brainwashed by this mad pro-Gaza, pro-Hamas cult, and that this is someone who does actually need medical care, both in terms of getting some food back in their system, but also to unbrainwash them. Psychological, exactly right. And this is what happens, Alex, when you allow these horrible, evil ideas to fester and to grow, as we have done every Saturday, screaming about how Israel is evil, every Saturday having people out there supporting Hamas and things like this. This is what, and by the way, this has got worse, but it didn't start with October the 7th. And I remember one person who called herself a journalist ended up deleting a tweet, but originally someone from the leftist Novara Media said this is a day of celebration when the people of Palestine have broken free of their cages, of the event of the murder of 1,200 people and 38 children and babies and rapes of women and all the other horrible scenes we've seen. If that's not a mental illness, then I don't know what
why can't people just open a blimmin' history book or do a little Google and go, oh, right, so, Israel's just one tiny little country in the Middle East like that. It's the oldest religion on earth. The Israelites have always been there and been turfed out, thrown out of their country on numerous occasions. They've been persecuted, they've been treated horrifically, they've gone back to their country, and all the surrounding countries would rather they were not there. Although that's changing, thank goodness, because they are the people who have been persecuted historically. It is not difficult to find that stuff out. And again, moronic. It's the same, all of these things, the open borders, that, we must be governed by somebody else. Israel are the enemy, when it's quite clear there are 53 Muslim nations on planet Earth, and the Jews just have one tiny bit of land, and do you know what? They were there first. It's evidence throughout history that they were there first. And I cannot understand how so many inversions of the truth have been seeded and grown and taken hold in such a large subsection of the populace. I mean, 18% of people say they're going to vote for the Green Party, for crying out loud. We really are in the grips of a mental health pandemic, aren't we, in the West?
Well, I think so. And when it starts to make a bit more sense when you realise that if the Chinese Communist Party and if the evil regime in Moscow and if the Iranian Revolutionary Army and Guard Corps in Iran wanted to attack the West, one of the ways they would do it would be to brainwash young people. And I think this is exactly what has been happening. I'm with Peter Thiel, who says that the app TikTok is a Chinese super weapon aimed at the amygdala, aimed at the brains of our young people.
Yes.
Although it's not just young people. I think about 30 million individual people use TikTok in the UK. And academic studies have shown that the more time you spend on TikTok, for example, the more positive an opinion you have of the Chinese Communist Party. And I think they send the same kind of brain rot to young people that Palestine is really great and Israel is really evil, and oh, maybe the Jews are bad after all, and all these sorts of things. And it doesn't just stop with the Jews. It never does. It's also the same platform. And there are other platforms and other kind of psychological warfare being done that make you go, oh yeah, America's much more evil than Russia. Oh yeah, Churchill was much worse than Hitler, and all these sorts of anti-Western ideas. This is exactly the kind of psychological warfare the Soviet Union tried to do, as Yuri, was his name, Yuri Begmanov, revealed as a double agent, talking about these were the kind of approaches we would try and do. It's why the communists targeted universities and the useful idiots there. And the same thing is happening again. So if you're someone watching this and you know someone in your family who started doing all these faddish, modish, lefty ideas, yeah, Jews are bad and all the rest of it, maybe you say, where'd you get this information from? And oh, maybe you should think a little bit more critically about this stuff that's probably being pumped out from the Kremlin or from Beijing, and think for yourself. Why is it that when the Berlin Wall was up, people were fleeing from the east into the West, to the capitalist West? I wonder. Look at the Koreas. Try and get people to think about some of these real-world experiments. And maybe that communism ain't so great. Maybe Islamism ain't so great. Maybe the West ain't so bad after all.
Indeed, the West was pretty much a brilliant place to be up until about 5 years ago. James, thank you ever so much for giving my voice a little holiday. I'm going to take a short break now and have a good old cough and a splutter. And after that, help me out, would you, by giving me a call and letting me know your thoughts on everything we've been talking about. 03444991000 is the number to dial. It's your normal network rate. I'll be back just after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Okay, welcome back. I've had a cough, I've had some ibuprofen, I've got a cup of tea, raring to go, sort of. And here to help me out is Stephen in Manchester. Hi there, Stephen.
Good morning to you. I wanted to raise, as I often do, the topic of demography, because we are being irretrievably sold out. You're mentioning the future.
Yes.
Here now, many of our city centres have simply gone, and the nation is its organic self. It takes generations. There are things transmitted, subtle and not so subtle, down those generations. And if those generations are not replaced by their own kind, but rather replaced by alien hordes, you do not have that nation going.
I mean, look, let's. This is always such a sensitive and taboo topic. We've got to tread around this one gently. But what you're saying is absolutely correct, which is what I find so fascinating, Stephen, is there's a tendency now, in terms of trendy ideologies, to talk about how grotesque and horrible it was for the Western Europeans to go and colonise other parts of the world. And also, you know, when we talk about Aborigines in the Australia, New Zealand, when we talk about American Indians, native Indians, losing their lands, so on and so forth. And if it was any other people and any other place on Earth, there would be huge protests about maintaining or preserving culture and heritage and tradition. But for some reason, it's perfectly okay to envisage a future where essentially Western civilization no longer exists. And we're not allowed to talk about this subject as well on top of that, and yet we find ourselves at an 11th hour when it comes to demography, and not just in terms of huge population changes due to mass migration, but a massively lower birth rate. And nobody really seems to understand what's going on here, and I think I've got to the bottom of this. Because people keep saying, oh, well, it's all women's fault. They want to go to work. It must be women. They want it all now. They don't want to be mothers. And I don't think that's fundamentally true. I know a lot of women who want to be mothers. I think most women are biologically wired up to want to be mothers. I personally think that the issue lands with men. And I'll explain why. We live in a country now where my generation has been utterly infantilized. There's a culture of instant gratification, and there is a rejection of any sort of responsibility. The idea that you might have to sacrifice something, sacrifice holidays, sacrifice a night out, sacrifice being able to buy the latest whatever it is. It isn't even about economics, because people go, well, it's because people can't get on the housing ladder. Piffle, I say, having lived across the developing world, where they have massive birth rates and barely 2 pennies to rub together. Culturally, what we have done is replace the fundamental contract between a man and a woman, that of an access to a woman's body in return for commitment and monogamy. We have erased that contract, replaced it with hypersexualization, and on top of that, we have engendered within men in particular a sort of Peter Pan ethos, where they don't want to settle down. There's no stigma attached anymore to a man in his 40s who is not married and doesn't have children. But you wind the clock back about 20, 30 years, that would have been horrific to contemplate. Everyone thought he'd be a weirdo. And culturally, what we have done is erase the concept of a nuclear family as well. We've also gone after men and sort of told them that, you know, they're patriarchal and there's toxic masculinity. And so I think if we are going to start addressing demography, not only do we need to look at inward migration, which everyone knows, we've been talking about it, you know, weeks, months, years, and certainly for most part of the show already. But we also need to somehow get through to the menfolk and say, listen, sunshine, it is time to grow up. Okay? The fun days are over. You've had your stag do's and your parties. There's nothing more valuable in life than being a husband and a father. That is reaching your full potential. You know, looking after your wife and your cubs. That is the most manly, beautiful thing that any man can do. And I think we need to start addressing them if we're going to tackle this issue. That's my 2 bit. I don't know what you think about that, Stephen.
Well, I mean, I think you bang on the mark here. Kipling wrote 100 years ago, men of my own stock, bitter bad they may be, but at least they hear the things I hear and they see the things I see. And if we're to have those men of our own stock, we must put, again, the Christian ethic and marriage back on a pedestal, because the declining birth rate is as big a threat to our future as is mass importation of entirely...
There you go. And, as they say, is it easy times make soft men and soft men make hard times? And I think that is what we are living through. Stephen, thank you ever so much. Let's speak now to Ian in Bridgend. Hi, Ian.
Hello, Alex. Merry Christmas to you.
Oh, Merry Christmas to you as well.
It's just to the issue of smash the gangs, stop the boats. But I commend a YouTube channel, Danny Tomo, and his colleague there with the Raise the Colours band, what they're up to with Operation Overlord out in France, actually finding and slashing the dinghies and destroying the outboard motors. It's an excellent job they're doing out there. And it really brings to light what's actually taking place, not what the politicians are telling us.
Blimey, you're leading me into some difficult places on air right now. It's a stressful job, I tell you what, sitting here and not messing up. So I've got to intervene and say I cannot in any way endorse or encourage sort of mercenary activities on the other side of the channel. And it's interesting, James Bice was just talking about this, the government's inability or lack of will to do anything about this, we both fear could lead to people taking matters into their own hands. But but we can't endorse this, okay? Because people might be risking their own lives. You don't know who you're dealing with these gangs. They're not just cuddly nice people, okay? But also you could potentially be risking other people's lives. So, however valiant and however correct the motivation might be to try and stop this from taking place, I don't think we can essentially celebrate or applaud people taking matters into their own hands, because the consequences could end up being extremely unfortunate.
Plus, we can say as a public information exercise, people could educate themselves as to what's taking place then. Plus, we just say that, is it?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, that's it. Like I said, I think this is inevitable. I think, of course, it's going to start happening. People are getting so alarmed and so upset by this, and the lack of action by the government on this matter, governments both sides of the channel, frankly speaking, that it almost does seem like an inevitability that you are going to get people who start wanting to intervene themselves. But I will repeat again, it's not particularly desirable when people take the law into their own hands. The buck stops with the government, but as citizens, as law-abiding citizens, it's very difficult, but we just have to lump it, don't we? We have to use democracy as our main tool to try and effect a change. But I'll look at that anyway. I was speaking to an old friend of mine who's a veteran.
Yeah. And
he's aware of various other Army veterans who are contemplating taking action. But when that happens, I will report on it live from this chair. But believe you me, I'm going to come out in hives if we keep having, changing demographics, stopping the boats ourselves. I'm going to be sacked by the end of this show. Ian, thank you ever so much. Nonetheless, diolch yn fawr. Right, let's take a short break. Blimey, I think I need a whiskey already. It's only 22:11. Let's take a short break now. And when we come back, we're going to be speaking to former Met Police DCI Mike Neville, talking about the horrific shoplifting epidemic. 800 offences unsolved every single day. I mean, everywhere you look, things are just falling apart, including me. I'm back after this.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
All right, welcome back. You know, little Kev's just cheered me up. He's bought me a little Christmas present. Isn't that sweet? Oh, I do love Kev. He is a big misanthropist. We all know that. He tends to dislike humans and much prefer animals, but he's got such a gentle side. And we're welcoming to the studio the brilliant Mike Neville. Hello, my love. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm very well, actually.
Oh, shall we get into the festive spirit and talk about people nicking things?
Well, it is the festive thing to do, it would seem.
Tidings of loot.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about retail staff facing a Christmas shoplifting epidemic, 810 offences going unsolved every day, almost 300,000 cases closed with no suspects identified in the last year. More than half a million thefts reported, up 65%.
So what you've got to imagine,
on the
Alex,
year before.
But what you've got to imagine is there's a lot more than 800 shopliftings a day.
Oh, no,
the only
are.
time that a shopkeeper will report a shop theft is if they catch the criminal, or there's been some kind of violence, or something really, really valuable is stolen and they've got to claim it on the insurance. So thousands and thousands of shopliftings each day go unreported because there's little point. And I saw that the Liberal Democrats are saying, oh, we need mass CCTV. We've already got mass CCTV.
Yes.
We've already got that. What is failing here, and it's my area of expertise really in the police, is that whereas with fingerprints and DNA there's a national database, there is no national database of images. So, if you get caught, if you go into the police station under arrest, say your fingerprints and DNA and an image of you, a mugshot. The fingerprints and DNA are run across a national database, so if you're wanted for a theft or a burglary or rape somewhere else, they'll catch you. The images are just filed away. So you could have done 10 shopliftings wearing exactly the same clothes, and that image is never checked on a database. Right. And I keep saying this to the police, and they're obsessed. Mark Rowley's saying, shopkeepers must hand over more CCTV. They already hand over CCTV. What's the problem is the police have no systems to deal with images, particularly if you're an organised thief. So if you're prepared to bounce around up in the north, Bolton, Burnley, St Helens, Preston, they all sound close, but they're in 4 different police areas, and so those images are never shared and no one ever links them together. And so if they're ever caught, these shoplifters, they get done for one, if they get done, one, and then they get what, a 10-bob sentence or a warning or something like that. And so there's no deterrent. Why wouldn't you carry on?
But it's also my understanding is that this isn't just a case of people going, oh, my kids aren't going to have a Scale Extrix this Christmas, I'm just going to lift it off the shelf. A lot of this is down to organised crime as well. You know, when you look at the theft of things such as wines or luxury meats and so on and so forth, my understanding is a huge amount of this is going round the back of restaurants and takeaways, being sold on the black market, but also put into vans and being taken across Europe.
Well, even further. So I heard from one of the heads of the major supermarket security that baby milk, baby milk, the children must be starving. Well, the baby milk is actually being shipped to Vietnam. That's how far that's going out. I mean, I have to say, one of the best organised crimes I ever saw was a pub in Pimlico, where there was a nice petrol station with a nice garage shop attached to it, food, and where you went into this rather seedy pub, but you could order really good food. But you had drug addicts around the back, and he'd they want the steak, and they'd go across the shop and nick the stuff. So 10 minutes later, it's served up on you. That's how stupid it is. That's how bad it is. And people, like I say, no one's starving. When somebody steals 4 legs of lamb, they're not eating 4 legs of lamb, they're going to sell that on. And the booze especially will go to warehouses where, if you run a club, why should you pay full price when you can go to this squalid and dishonest place and you can buy it half or a third of the price? Right. All very organised and stolen to order. As you say, there's no one nicking it because...
It's highly professional and sophisticated now. And, there's multiple reasons why this is happening. You're talking about pubs potentially buying cut-price products. I mean, when you look at the business rate changes of pubs now, It's insane.
Yeah,
How are they supposed to stay afloat? Not that I'm endorsing buying sort of bootleg
the other thing you got
backdoor
is the
stuff.
internet now. So whereas one time you had to nick the stuff and then go around hawking it round a pub and stuff, now you've got all sorts of facilities on the internet to sell stolen goods. And the key thing for me is the trouble is the very organised nature of these things. It's fueling other crimes unless we get a grip of it. But the police could get a grip. I've offered to help them for free. You know, they keep saying they got no money. I say, I'll help you for free. We'll set this up. A friend of mine designed this database who would manage all these things. We've been trying to find a police force to say, look, you can have it for free. And,
right, wow.
But everything's hard work with the police. You've got an IT department whose sole notion is to say no to everything. It's dreadful. So they're not catching
bureaucratisation
of this country.
Well, at least there's some good news, which is that non-crime hate incidents are to be scrapped. Thank goodness for that. I mean, it's so ridiculous that these existed in the first place. And it's not only is it ridiculous that they came into fruition, that they even exist, but that police seem to want to investigate them. If I was a police chief and, you know, someone phoned up and said, oh, my brother-in-law said such and such the other day, I'd just say, we're not going to go and knock on his door. That's ridiculous. Well, I don't understand how police forces have lost their minds over this.
Well, let me tell you how the mind loss came. So, Stephen Lott, I'm partly to blame for this. So I released some figures. As a young officer, I did some research into the levels of street crime committed by young black men. That was actually released by the Commissioner, Sir Paul Condon. And there was massive criticism. They didn't like it. It's only now we're allowed to talk about these. We're talking in the 90s here. And then the Stephen Lawrence murder occurred, and that tragic murder, they then used that, as the left-wing politicians used that as a stick to beat the police. It's more to do with incompetence, anything, that murder wasn't solved as quickly as it should have been. Nothing else, incompetence and other things. But what happened then, after Stephen Lawrence, you had the Macpherson report, and in it, this introduces concept of hate crimes. And this country's always been based on facts. Show me the evidence. But this was the first time if it's perceived to be racist. So feelings started to dominate facts. So you didn't have to give any reasons. So the reports in the paper, a bloke complains he's got a dodgy haircut, or the bloke did it because I felt he was racist, or something like that. Somebody was hanging up dirty underpants on the washing line. That's a racist incident against me. So all that nonsense was allowed to flourish. And what you have is the police are now dominated by the establishment, the liberal Guardian reading class. To them, this is more important. Racism is the ultimate crime.
Yeah.
And thieving and robbing and raping, that's a secondary issue. And what you have here, the police are solving at the moment 1% of thefts, 5% of burglaries, if that, 5% of rapes. So you think, if they were solving 95% of all these crimes, they think, well, we've got not much time on our hands here, so what we'll do, we'll police being nice to each other. But they haven't got loads of time on their hands. They've already got... why are they ignoring this?
It's just...
too easy. It's too easy.
Yeah, I know.
Too easy.
Oh, it's such a...
You know, because somebody reports a burglary, Alex, you've got to go and you've got to investigate that, take fingerprints, DNA, get some CCTV, find the offender. If a neighbour says, oh, Alex said to me this horrible word, they know who you are. It's an easy arrest.
Yeah, especially if it's on social media post. Oh, here's the evidence.
Here it printed out next door to me. Oh. So it's easy peasy, and let's hope they say they're going to use common sense. What their common sense and our common sense is sometimes not the same thing. That's the problem.
Well, let's hope that 2026 we start to see an improvement on all fronts. Yeah. Mike, thank you ever so much for coming into the studio.
And Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you as well. Right, talking about Merry Christmas, we're going to be discussing how difficult it is out there for the majority of people. It turns out that disposable income is at its lowest level since before the pandemic, down to repeated tax raids. We're going to be speaking to Mitchell Palmer, who's a top economist, about that just after this.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Do you know, isn't it such a grim juxtaposition when you look around and you feel like nothing's really working properly? You know, crimes aren't being solved, our borders are being utterly raided. And you also feel like your taxes are the highest they've ever been. You see the money coming into your bank account and going straight back out again. And you think, what am I getting for this? What am I actually paying for? The taxes are so high, the highest they've ever been. And yet nothing is working and nothing seems to be being done in the public's interest. Well, it turns out household disposable income has slumped to its lowest level since before the pandemic. Income per person shrank 0.8% in the 3 months to September compared to the previous quarter. That was after taking into account inflation. That's according to the good old ONS, who said the fall was driven by a £6 billion increase in taxes, including higher capital gains levies introduced by good old Rachel Thieves and a stealth raid on incomes introduced by the previous Conservative government. Let's speak to Mitchell Palmer, economist at the Adam Smith Institute. Good morning to you, Mitchell.
Morning.
Why are we in such a horrific mess that the taxes keep going up and up and up, and yet it seems nothing has the right funding, nothing has the right resources, nothing's able to be done properly? I mean, why are we in such an economic doom loop?
Well, I guess the key point is that all of this is measured relative to how much the private sector produces. That's the only way you can pay for those great public services that we all want. And the reality is that private sector growth has been to some extent strangled by a knot both of high taxes, but also really substantial regulatory burdens. So the obvious place to look, for instance, is house building in London has collapsed, and that is driven largely by regulatory impost. So if you want to sort of ease the burden on households, the only solution is to grow that pie. And unfortunately, no government since the global financial crisis has really managed to oversee sustained long-term growth in per capita market incomes.
How much has COVID been a factor in all of this? Certainly there's a lot of red tape clogging up businesses, clogging up infrastructure. 400 quangos, for crying out loud. I mean, no wonder we can't get anything done. But how much has COVID itself been a part of this? Because something really struck me. I used to live in Belgium. And frankly speaking, Brussels has always been tattier than London. It just has. And I left living in Belgium at the start of COVID. All the borders were shutting, and I thought to myself, I don't want to get stuck on this side of the channel. I'm going to go back to the UK. And I was back in Brussels not long ago, giving a speech at an event. And when I look at what the changes that have taken place, places like Oxford Street, where it's almost unrecognisable to what it used to be 10 years ago, when you then see what's happened in Brussels since the pandemic, my goodness, it looks utterly dilapidated. It's even worse. And I think this is a scene that I can see reflected in multiple towns and cities across Europe, which makes me think that actually what we did during COVID, closing down businesses, essentially plugging the economy with a load of hot cash while it wasn't actually functioning, and then spending a lot of money on doing that, indebting the general public as a result, has had an impact that, well, I mean, are we ever going to recover from this?
I mean, I guess it's important to distinguish both the short-term effects of COVID, which we have now recovered from. So if you look at that graph of our HDI, you can see there's a collapse during COVID because prices went up. We had that sort of post-COVID inflation spike. And slowly but surely, people's wages have caught up. So we are back kind of to where we were. But then obviously the tax take has increased, which has reduced some of that recovery. So I guess on the short run, I'd say, we have recovered from COVID. Incomes are back, net pre-tax incomes are back to where they were before COVID, adjusting for prices. But in a longer run sense, as you say, we have a huge debt burden we now need to service. Interest rates have gone up and may stay there for some time. And that obviously makes that big debt pile more expensive to service. And obviously, you also feel it if you hold a mortgage or anything like that. And obviously, rates may come down, but that is not necessarily a good sign. That just means the economy is in worse shape than we thought. So, yes, I mean, COVID clearly has had some effect. And it's likely to keep having an effect as we have this very large debt burden we need to pay off over time.
I mean, is it fair to say, and this is my own political opinion, that the state we're in right now, the worst possible medicine to give to an ailing patient who is indebted, who has, slumping economy, whose businesses are collapsing, is a good old bout of left-wingery. And yet that is the situation we're in. At one point the Labour Party was saying, well, we can't afford to do things like lift the two-child benefits cap. And then next thing, they're raiding our bank account saying that this is of utmost importance that we do this.
I mean, yes, putting more taxes on an ailing economy is not a recipe for growth. The reality is not only does that suck money out of the private sector, so you and I have less money to spend on the high street, but also, obviously, when you are taxed, you change the way you behave. So you may have seen there was a great article in The Economist a few months ago about the Henry Cliff, that people who are just on £100,000 face an effective marginal tax rate of 65%. Yeah. And that's before their student loans, if they still have them. And so obviously those sort of cliffs exist throughout the tax system. And basically for a lot of people, it just doesn't make sense to work. We see that most obviously with people at the very low end of incomes who choose to stay on disability benefits rather than finding work. So, that as you say, the solution to this cannot be increasing taxes, which are at their height.
Is it true that essentially if you are on minimum wage with more than 3 kids, you've actually got less disposable income than if you're on benefits with more than 3 kids?
I haven't done the maths, and I'm sure someone else has, and it wouldn't surprise me if that were true now the two-child benefit cap has been removed. Obviously, that is a huge problem and the whole system was meant to be designed to prevent those cliffs from happening.
Mitchell, thank you ever so much. Hopefully, at some point, we'll get a government in who actually understands how the economy works. Of course, Rachel Reeves is a top economist. Never forget she put that on her CV. Mitchell Palmer there, who's an economist at the Adam Smith Institute. We're going to be taking a short break very shortly. When I come back, we're going to be joined by former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards, and I certainly have some big questions to ask him because not a lot of what they're doing seems to make sense to me at the moment, and it'd be interesting to hear some of the positions being defended by someone who is of that particular political tribe. So I'm looking forward to speaking to Paul Richards after the break. Keep your thoughts coming in. 0344499 1000 is the number to dial if you want to chat to me at some point. It's your normal network rate. You can phone anytime. Use that number to send a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 on the text. Like talk before you message. Back after this.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometers have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back. 1 hour down, 2 to go, and then I'm going to have a bath of Lemsip or some such, and try and see if I can perk up and sound a bit less croaky ahead of tomorrow. Thank you ever so much for keeping me company on the eve of Christmas Eve, or Christmas Eve, as some might say. Christmas Eve squared, perhaps, I don't know. If you're going to write it as equation, maybe it's Christmas to Eve, I don't know. Right, okay, if you want to get in touch and talk to me about anything that we are discussing today, do feel free to do so. You'll be giving my voice a little well-earned rest. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial. It's your normal network rate, and you can call that at any point and register your interest, and we will give you a call back. The service here is utterly exemplary. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message and leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722 is the number. If you'd rather text, though, if you're going to do that, you have to write the word talk before you type the content of your message. OK, I'm joined now by Paul Richards, who's former Labour Special Advisor. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today, because I really have wanted to quiz someone from Labour about all sorts of things that have been popping up in the papers lately. And we always have a good old open and frank discussion, you and I really do appreciate you for that. Let's talk, first of all, about Crowborough. The population in that area very unhappy about the 540 male asylum seekers who are going to be put in the barracks there. Well, you know this anyway. The youngsters have been turfed out. They're no longer allowed to use it. It won't be safe for them, apparently. You can understand, can't you, why the local population are very alarmed about 540 men that they don't know coming to suddenly be on their doorstep. why isn't the Labour Party getting on top of this? Because it's really going to reach a point. We were discussing this earlier in the show. It's going to reach a point where people start taking matters into their own hands. I do worry things are going to get ugly.
Well, the first and the most important point is to wish you a very happy Christmas, Alex.
Oh, you too, Paul. I do appreciate that. Thank you ever so much.
And it is that time of year. On the substantive point about Crowborough, of course I understand why people have got great disquiet about this. It is it's a major change to what's going on in the town. It's a military barracks. It's not been used for a while, and it's now going to have people in it. The thing I would say to people, though, is first of all, the most important thing is to end these hotels. Nobody now thinks that putting asylum seekers into hotels is a good idea. I think one of the biggest public policy mistakes of the last 10 years has been that. And even Conservatives are now saying it was a bad idea for them to do it. So if we're going to end these hotels and the hoteliers profiteering from this, then the people have got to go somewhere. And military camps that are obviously have borders and are enforced and are designed for the sort of purpose of putting a lot of young men in a single place are the best place to do it. Now, no one wants that on their doorstep, whether it's Crowborough or any of the other sites that are being earmarked. But I would say it is temporary. It is not going to be a permanent fixture. And there will be proper policing of it. And I would say, just to your last point about people taking things into their own hands, there are outside agitators coming in and stirring up trouble. One of the arrests that was made, I noticed, was somebody who wasn't even from Crowborough. And I think the danger is of these kind of vigilantes setting up shop is that people will get hurt and local people may get dragged into that sort of dangerous thing. So leave the policing to the police would be my main message.
I couldn't agree more. I just want to pick up on something you said. I've written it down and put a big cloudy circle around it with my biro, which is the words enforced borders, ironically, because you're talking about how military camps have the advantage, essentially, of being surrounded by very high fences with chicken wire on the top, and they're going to be properly policed. Does that mean these men will not be allowed to go out and about in the local area? Will they be under a curfew?
I don't believe that there will be a total enforcement of a sort of prison-like environment, but I suspect there will be people being allowed furloughs into the local area, and that's probably a good thing, isn't it? And people should be allowed out for a bit of fresh air and walks and so on.
Well, it might not be a good thing if you're a 14-year-old girl. That seems to be the main worry of the population, because we're seeing repeatedly incidents of men who have come from countries with very different attitudes towards women, who might have a perception of our liberties and our sexual freedoms over here, not behaving appropriately. And understandably, parents are extremely anxious about this. And surely it is also not untrue to say that there's a proportion of these people who aren't really asylum seekers, are they? They are people who would rather just come and live here and make money on the black market, and have entered the country, not via any sort of proper route. Why shouldn't they be kept contained? If it's an army barracks, they can go outside, they can play football within the grounds of the army barracks, they can have entertainments on site. A lot of these places that accommodate migrants do seem to go above and beyond the call of duty when it comes to providing, whether it's karaoke machines, football tables. Would it not be a good idea, in order to sort of send a message to people coming into the country, you can't work illegally and you're not going to be handed everything on a silver platter? We will make sure that you are fed and watered and in safe accommodation. But guess what? You're not going to be able to go out and about and, enjoy what the local community may have to offer.
Well, on your first point about children's safety, of course, that is one of the big concerns, which is why I say it needs to be properly policed, and whatever efforts have to be done to make sure that there isn't that kind of risk that you describe. Because that's something that obviously people are rightly concerned about. And on your second point about keep people sort of contained permanently in the camp, I think the danger with that is that it would be very combustible, and you might get sort of really bad situations, possibly rioting and God knows what else going on if you simply lock people up in like a prison. And I think having, controlled walks or sporting events, or even, engaging with the local townspeople in shared endeavours might break down some of
What does properly policed look like, Paul?
Well,
because it doesn't seem to me that these places are properly policed. Certainly when it comes to the hotels, there have been queues of, delivery vehicles outside. People are clearly working on the black market. We've seen plenty of incidents with people getting up to things they ought not to be doing. And there was the one story, for instance, of an Egyptian who was over here who'd been thrown out of Egypt for making bombs and things like that. And you'd think and the Home Office knew about this guy and what he had gotten up to and why he had fled Egypt. And then he wasn't properly policed. He's a potential would-be terrorist, but he went on to attack a woman in Hyde Park. So when you say properly policed, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, enough police to be able to make sure that order is maintained and we don't get vigilantes, like I said before. But the other
you're more worried about the vigilantes and these men potentially...
about the whole situation. But the answer to all of this, of course, is to have faster processing. So the kinds of people you're describing there who really shouldn't be here at all because they are criminals or terrorists or, they faked their ID or whatever it might be, we might have much faster processing, so people are booted out quicker and aren't just hanging around for a year or two in a hotel or a camp. They're not here at all. And so I think there's a lot more effort needs to be put into the processing of that. And then I'm going to say something that's going to make you roll your eyes now, Alex, which is we also need to smash those gangs, because the gangs are the people who are exploiting people's desire to go to a new country, and then telling them that, oh, don't worry, you can go and work for a fast food delivery organization when you get there. And, even gaming the system by telling them how to sound like the asylum seekers if they're not. And, that business model needs to be disrupted as well. Otherwise, we're going to just keep seeing small boat crossings because, while people are profiting from it, they'll always go after where the money is.
I mean, it's not the problem, though. I tend to be on the side of the French with this, who say you make your country like El Dorado for these people. That's why they're trekking across Europe, accumulating in Calais in order to try and get to Great Britain, because they do get to come and, do what they like when they get here. They get shelter, they get food, and they get full liberty. And that is part of the problem, is it not? If we did make it less attractive and say, right, you're going to be on an army barracks, but guess what? That is where you're going to stay. You'd quickly find people not wanting to get in a boat and cross in the channel, surely.
Well, the trigger word for me there is the French, because the French are simply not doing enough to stop these boats leaving French shores in the first place. And we've seen situations where the French authorities are standing by while the boats are leaving.
Okay, true. I agree with you there. But the thing is, we can't control what the French do as much as we might like to.
Because we're giving them money. We're giving them taxpayers' money.
Well, no, we are. But what we can do and should be doing is looking at the ways in which we are approaching this as a nation. That is what the government's primary responsibility is. So surely they should be thinking very much about making it far less attractive and appealing, because we know, don't we, that these people haven't sort of magicked in the time machine and come from Syria over to Calais or over to Dover. They've gone through lots of countries. They've had their asylum claims rejected, or they've traipsed across Europe precisely because they want to come to Britain, because our offer is the best.
Well, I think you're right to identify this as a massive global problem. And I think people sometimes think it's just us that are suffering this.
No, it's not.
Every country across Europe is having the same issues around borders and control, and a big shift of populations from the south and the east into the north and the west. Basically, that's what's going on around.
Some countries aren't having the same issues, though, are they? Poland and Hungary are not having the same issues because they're not playing by the rules. They've decided they don't want to do what countries in Western Europe are doing, and are extremely strict. Some countries are saying we won't accept any asylum seekers, albeit they might have to pay a fine to the EU of €1 million a day. It works out as quite a bargain compared to what we're spending.
Well, Shabana Mahmood, I think, is looking at the Danish model of this, and I think there's elements of that which do create a disincentive and sort of choke off some of the flow, and I think that's something to look at. But I'll return to a theme which I've been saying all year, which is if there was a single simple thing that any government could do to stop the boats, they would have done it by now. It is a very complex problem, and that's what every nation is discovering. We do have to take some people in who are genuine asylum seekers, because that is our British tradition and the law. But we've got to do far more to stop all the people coming who shouldn't be here in the first place. And once they're here, they should be processed quickly and sent back from whence they came as fast as we can. So we don't have the camps as a permanent fixture. They are a temporary measure to deal with a crisis.
Let's move on, because certainly on this one, we don't see eye to eye. And so I'm afraid I'm just far less hospitable than you, Paul, when it comes to my sympathies from people who come from far-flung countries and their access to come and live here.
Even at Christmas.
Even though it's Christmas, I'm afraid I just, like I said, I would much rather we put money into building, if they need to have refugee camps, fine, let's give money to the neighbouring countries of the affected countries and say, here you go, here's a load of money, build some camps there. That's been the international protocol when it comes to refugees since time immemorial, not crossing a gazillion countries, getting a dinghy and getting in a hotel or an army barracks. And that, to me, seems to make sense. Keep people assimilated where they are culturally best fit. You give them, make sure they've got food and shelter in the hope that they can be repatriated back to their homelands quickly. I'd rather someone from Syria is put up in some sort of encampment, I don't know, in a neighbouring country. That would suit me down to the ground. Thank you very much.
Well, that is what's happening. That does happen anyway, by the way. I mean, most refugees are in the country next door to the country they've fled, like the Rohingya or whoever. So anyway, let's move on to
let's do it. I was going to say, I'm afraid I don't seem to think the many of the surrounding Gulf nations are as charitable as we are, and I don't know why we don't leverage a bit more our relationships with them. But let's move on, because there's so much to talk about. And there's I'm going to get rid of that one, because that's just boring. Let's talk about the Palestine Action hunger strikers.
Yeah.
I mean, I just surely there's no way. I mean, we're not. It seems to me good that the government aren't caving into this, because it'd be totally inappropriate. It would set a very dangerous protocol, wouldn't it? Caving into the demands of prisoners who are refusing to eat.
I think the thing that concerns me most about this whole terrible situation is the people who have put these young people up to this, who've normalised it and told them that they will be martyrs, who have created a sort of support network, a PR campaign around it, without any risk to themselves, and have put some young, I suspect quite vulnerable people at real genuine risk now to their own health. And for what? There's not going to be a Palestinian state as a result of anyone harming themselves in this way. It doesn't advance the two-state solution in any way, jot or comma, but it does put lots of young people at terrible risk. And I think, we shouldn't be encouraging the idea that it's good to be a martyr, because we know where that leads in terms of suicide bombings and all the rest.
I mean, you say there's not going to be a Palestinian state, but I thought the Labour Party, this government, decided to recognise that.
Well, I'm saying that a hunger strike isn't going to give you a Palestinian state. Careful negotiation might lead to a two-state solution down the line. We're not anywhere near that now. But I think there should be a careful look at the people who are encouraging this and seeing whether their criminal proceedings can be brought against those people, because they are in effect causing harm to somebody else by telling them it's okay to not eat in prison in order to, in pursuit of some lofty goal that won't actually be realised. I mean, it would be terrible if somebody died as a result of this. And that's, to me, it's brainwashing. They've been brainwashed.
No, I agree with you. It is a fanaticism, and it is incredibly disturbing. And finally, talking about brain damage, let's move on to sentience, shall we? Do you think that a lobster has more value and is more sentiment than, say, a cow?
Well, I don't think we should be boiling them alive, if that's your question. I don't know.
So you know where I'm going to go with this, don't you?
Well, of course. I mean, the animal welfare announcement this week, I would warmly welcome, because at every stage where we've tried to improve animal welfare, whether it's ending battery hens or puppy farms or whatever it is, there's always cries of outrage by people saying, oh, well, the people abroad do it, why shouldn't we?
No, look, I'm on the side of the lobsters. I'm on the side of the lobsters in this. I like my creatures, but I especially care for cows, OK? I like cows enormously. I used to live in India. I don't even eat beef myself. But I think that one of the cruelest things that can be done is an animal being conscious while you slice its throat and it bleeds to death. And when you look at non-stunned abattoirs, it isn't just the cruelty to the animals that is alarming. Inspections of those slaughterhouses that have been carried out show that they have a propensity far higher than any other abattoir when it comes to major animal distress, hygiene standards, welfare standards. It is a vile practice. Why haven't the Labour Party, if they care for the creatures so much, said we've got to end non-stun slaughter?
I have to say, if I ran the world, then religious sentiment would not stand in the way of animal welfare. And I think, you know, somebody say what it says in this old book, that we should do it in this way or that way. And I'm not picking out any one particular religion in this. I think that should not be a good reason to harm animals or give them the kind of distress you say. I don't think it should be politicised, but I do think we do need a kind of rational argument about how laws are made and what influences them. And it should be science and reason.
I agree.
Rather than any other factor. But
and I must say, particularly when it's not the religion of our own country. You know, if we're going to start bowing down to religious mores, then surely we should bow down to Christian mores first, and said, I don't know, legalise abortion, criminalise abortion, full stop. So I'm glad actually that we can agree on that one, and I think it is a justifiable question to ask of any government if they're talking about animal welfare, why not this? I've got some
great that we're ending puppy farms. I think that's horrific, and I think
totally.
Certainly during COVID, when everyone was buying dogs off God knows who in motorway service stations, you know, that led to a whole trade of this kind of puppy farming, which is so cruel for the dog. And I think that's something that's really, we can all agree on.
Yeah, do you know, I'd go even further. I'd bring back the dog licence, quite frankly, because I think there are people who keep dogs in flats and inner cities, and that's just not okay. We can go on for ages about this, but I'm on the side of the animals, fundamentally. I'm not a vegetarian, but I am very much on the side of the quadrupeds. Now, I've got some breaking news, which I can put to you, get your reaction to this, because Greta Thunberg's in town. Woohoo! But apparently she has now been arrested in central London at a demonstration in support of the Palestine Action protesters on hunger strike in prison. So there she is. She's feeding this narrative about, you know, carry on with that hunger strike. Why? I mean, look, to me, Greta Thunberg is just I mean, she's an annoyance and an agitator. I've never taken her seriously. I've always thought that this is a sort of weird, peculiar, mawkish habit of full-grown men and women who are leaders of their countries holding her up like some sort of child oracle. It's rather embarrassing when you see the way she's behaving now, that so much of the world seems to kowtow to her, you know, climate, let's go on strike demands.
Well, she is an adult, let's not forget, so she's not a child.
She is now, yeah.
And second of all, I think she's a good example of what I was talking earlier, of people egging on others who are now in harm's way without any harm to themselves. It's the worst kind of virtue signalling and sort of, you know, pretending that it's all about you, which is what she's doing. So I don't know what she's been arrested for, but if it's supporting a terrorist organisation and using anti-Semitic language, whatever it might be, which I suspect it is, then I hope she gets the full force of the law against her.
Wise words, well said. Paul, thank you. It's always great having a discussion with you. And I always like it when we can sort of, you know, disagree on things and then find our points of commonality as well. We're going to be taking a short break now, but after that break, I'd love to speak to some of you about the topics we've been discussing today. The number is 0344499 1000. It's your normal network rate. You can also send me a WhatsApp, a voice note on WhatsApp, or a text message. 87222 is the number for that. Right, talk before you message, and back after this.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, I don't know about you, but I love a bit of Jive Bunny, right? Bring back Jive Bunny in the Mega Mix. We're not going to do that, but we are going to do a Mega Mix of voice notes now to get us into the festive spirit. Let's start off with Neil.
Morning, Alex. Neil from Basingstoke here. Just on the moving migrants around to military barracks, it doesn't really matter where they put them, does it? The fact of the matter is they shouldn't be here. Unfortunately, we've got a Prime Minister who isn't prepared to or hasn't got the backbone to actually do something about that. So all he's doing is moving them around to different communities, spreading them out. But as we know, even with Crowborough, 600 are going to be housed there. When the weather's good, that's less than 1 day's worth of migrants coming in. Got to stop, hasn't it? It's just too much. Anyway, sounding great this morning. Loving the husky voice. Bye.
Oh, I thank you. Maybe I'll try and keep it. Let's hear now from Kelvin.
Good morning, Alex. Merry Christmas to you. West Streeting, what a plonker. He says that he backs the whole of Britain for going back into the EU, or part of it, whatever. What a load of cobblers. Where's he got that from? I think before anybody decides to go back in there, I think we need to have another referendum. The people don't want it. They didn't want it back then either if they were told about it, So, no, we need a referendum on it. He can't just say on behalf of everybody else, we want to go back in and we're going back in. That's not democracy. That's a dictatorship again. Bye.
We don't need another referendum. We've had one. Kelvin, no. If we have another referendum, we're caving in, aren't we? The people made their decision. You've got to give this thing time. You can't just go fewer than 10 years down the line. Let's put it to a plebiscite again when we haven't really done anything with it in the first place. Shocking behaviour. Do you know, one thing strikes me, and it's this. I just don't think we've got high-quality politicians. I don't think we do. I don't think we've got people who are ideologues. I don't think we've got people who are conviction politicians. I don't think we've got people who are learned students of history. I don't think we've got people as politicians who actually understand politics. They think it's all some sort of performance art, some sort of charade, some sort of sixth form demonstration. Where's the calibre of people elected to run this country? It's just rock bottom at the moment, I'm afraid. That's my view. I'm not saying they're unintelligent. I just don't really know where proper politics went. It's just, it's banal and performative these days. That's anyway. Let's hear now from Darren.
Morning, Alex. Darren from Suffolk. Great show as ever. Interesting what James was saying. Look, I agree with a lot of things he says, but when he starts talking about TikTok, I think he needs to get on TikTok first. Why do you think Nigel Farage has got more followers on TikTok than the whole of the Labour Party put together? There are more people on TikTok that are against the left than for the left. TikTok is a good thing for us fighting this horrible leftist disease. Have a nice day.
Ooh, interesting take. You're right, he is supremely popular on TikTok. Apparently I pop up on there a lot and I don't even have the blimmin' app. Someone's nicking my face and making money from it. I'll tell you what though, I am not going on that platform, right? Because I know what it does in terms of spyware. I know all the other apps it can connect to. I know all the data that's being usurped and filched and taken off back to Beijing and then analysed, and I just don't want to be part of it. And I do think, look, even if there are going to be elements that are working out well for us, it is a sort of giant psyop in waiting. It definitely has the ability. Because, look, yes, I agree. There's a lot of the youth now are becoming alt-right, some people say, because of TikTok, because of the prevalence of people like Donald Trump and Nigel Farage and, you know, right-wing commentators doing really well on that platform. And yes, that's a good thing. But what about all the kids being brainwashed into thinking they've got gender dysphoria, for crying out loud? You know, there's two halves to this. And my concern, I think it's a valid concern, is that someone somewhere can sort of pull a lever when it comes to the algorithms and suddenly change the direction of travel. And so, you know, say Nigel Farage comes into office and then all of a sudden Beijing doesn't like that because he turns out to be sino-realistic, let's say, sino-pragmatic, and says you ain't getting your super embassy anymore. What's going to stop them going, I know, let's flood TikTok with the influencers who are calling for uprisings? And do you know what I mean? It might be working out okay now, but the capacity to suddenly veer things in a different direction should be taken very seriously. And finally, to wrap up our mega mix, here's Joe.
How come Japan has had no growth, but their services always run really well? I think we need to look at that rather than just always looking for growth to run our services. Thanks, Joe from Wigan.
I don't know anything about Japan, if I'm honest with you, Joe, but actually, I'll tell you what, right, they might not have growth. They've also got, one thing I do know, is one of the most ridiculous debt-to-GDP ratios in the developed world. My goodness. They are so indebted. And they had this sort of crazy policy at one point of just, in order to sort of have jobs and have people employed, they were just doing these massive infrastructure projects for no reason. They were building bridges to nowhere. I'm not joking, they were. And so, you know, when you look at the Japan model and you kind of think, I want to actually Google their debt to GDP. In fact, no, I'll see if one of my producers can Google Japan's debt to GDP ratio, because it is something utterly eye-watering. And you kind of think, what's going to happen as a result of that? Can someone call in those debts? Is that making them extremely geopolitically precarious? You know, there might be a lot of things in Japan that looks very high functioning. I've never been there, but there's certainly a lot that isn't. My understanding is if you wanted to try and get on the housing ladder in Tokyo, good luck to you. You're probably going to end up in a coffin-sized room for £1 gazillion and, you know, 100 times the amount of your annual salary or something. So things might work efficiently. I think, you know, efficiency, I think, is rather in the cultural nature of the Japanese, it has to be said. Oh, here we go. Brilliant. Japan's debt. Here we go. Get this right. So our debt to GDP ratio, I believe, is, it might be over 100% now. We used to be around the 95%. I think, I don't know if Rachel's managed to get on top of it, but I think we started tipping over 100, which is not where you want to be. But Japan's debt to GDP ratio is 236%. 236%, can you imagine? But they don't seem to care. They're like, oh, well, never mind, we've got so much debt, we're never going to pay that off. Oh, well, I mean, how does that work? There we go, UK's, someone's doing some sterling work in the gallery. The UK's public debt to GDP ratio is around 95 to 100% of GDP. There you go, I said that, didn't I? I know my onions when it comes to debt to GDP ratio tables in the world. So, yeah. Their stuff might run on time. I don't know. I've never been to Japan. They might have sort of brilliant technology, bullet trains and the like, but blimmin' heck, they've paid for it, haven't they? I don't know how that's going to work out for them in the long run. OK, brilliant voice notes there. Keep them coming in. The number is 03444991000. That's for WhatsApp. You can also call that number if you'd like to talk to me in person. Always welcome to do that. I'm perking up a bit now. The voice is still a little bit... My catarrh to esophageal ratio isn't looking very good right now. So I might have to have a little splutter from time to time. But you can relieve me by joining in the conversation yourself. It's the normal network rate. On text is 8722. Write the word talk before your message. And I'm delighted to say I'm going to be joined by one of my all-time favourites, Mr. Ralph Schulhammer, after this break.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Now, I have a feeling that my run of strange coincidences where Ralph and I seem to colour coordinate and match our clothes completely accidentally might be about to come to an end. Because yesterday I was joking about how Ralph always seems to, we don't conspire, we don't talk about this, but we always seem to look like we're in some sort of folk bands together because our clothes are always of the same ilk. And yesterday as I was making this joke, I was wearing a black turtleneck and so was he. But unfortunately I packed a leopard print turtleneck and that's the one I've put on today. And if that is what Ralph is choosing to sport, well, it would be a very Austrian choice, some might say, but I have a feeling he won't have that in his wardrobe, but you never know. Shall we have a look? Oh, no, he did. Ralph, it's over. It's done. We're not matching anymore. What a shame.
I retired all my leopard print outfits because it would make me look like a Russian pimp. And, in the current political climate, that is a very, very dangerous fashion choice. But I'll bring it back, I promise. Next year, I'll bring it back. I remember that time we went out for dinner and I was wearing my mad fluffy boots, which, by the way, were bought in Austria, and a camo coat. And you said that I had the same dress sense that you had as a teenager. Which is very true.
I would love to go through the Scholhammer family photo albums and have a look at that. And there you are, live from the sauna once again. I love this. I think it's actually got very good acoustics and a good backdrop. Everyone should do their broadcasting from a sauna if they can.
Yeah, I'm very happy. The family has exiled me, but what can you do?
One assumes the sauna isn't on.
No. Not yet.
Not yet. And in fact, next time, if we have you back on tomorrow, as it's Christmas Eve, perhaps the sauna should be on and you should just be sitting there, nothing but a fine film of sweat. And I definitely won't be matching you with that aesthetic, unless this fever gets worse. Right, now, let's talk about what's going on in the United Kingdom with migrants being moved into army barracks. I mean, the government's saying this is far better than people being in hotels. And I was speaking to a former Labour special advisor just before the break who was sort of suggesting, well, the good thing about army barracks is, they've got borders that could be enforced, which I think is rather ironic. But when I pushed him on, well, how is this going to be policed? He seemed to suggest that any policing would more be taking place to make sure the locals don't kick off about them being there. It's a madness. I really do worry that this is very quickly going to spiral out of control.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain irony, right? To a country that no longer has the ability to defend itself in various dimensions is now moving the newcomers into its army barracks. I mean, you could say there's some kind of cosmic irony to it. I'm sure similar things will happen in the rest of Europe as well. And maybe since it's close to Christmas, to have a little bit of a more cheerful note, I think we have reached breaking point in many countries. 2026, in my opinion, this is my prediction. I might be wrong. There's a little bit, of course, of wishful thinking here as well, that it will be the foothills of the coming revolution. Let's call it this. Now, whether this revolution will take place in the streets, at the polls, or in both cases, or at the polls and in the streets, we will see. But I think it's very clearly now that most of the people in Europe, or more generally in the West, have had enough. I'm a little bit worried, I'm sure we're going to talk about this as well, about the United States. I think the conservative infighting, if you want, is getting worse. So the idea that they will be the shining beacon, the guiding light for right-wing parties, for nationalist/patriotic parties all over the globe, I think that is at least dimming at the moment. But maybe reform can take their place, or maybe some continental European parties can take their place.
Yeah, I mean, do you think this is down to, if we have the right elections and the right elections go the right way, i.e. right wing, that this problem can finally be solved? Because I look at countries such as Hungary, where you live. Viktor Orban has no truck with asylum seekers, does he? He's sort of enforced very clearly the boundaries of Hungary. How is he doing it?
Well, I think there's a general agreement that one of the main responsibilities of every political party or of every political movement or of every government is the continuation of one's own people. And you mentioned Japan before, right? And their ridiculous debt to GDP ratio. But here's the thing. I mean, they also have, of course, these massive aging populations. There are many problems in Japan, but they are still distinctively Japanese. And usually, historically, right, if you have a high trust society, strong solidarity, a homogeneous culture, you can not everything, but you can go through lots of hardships and problems. Again, if you are gradually dying out like the Koreans and the Japanese, that's another issue. So it would be, there's no sugarcoating these problems. But the main issue you have in the UK, you have in Germany, you have in Austria, that we are slowly but surely irreversibly changing the national character of these countries. And if there is no solidarity, no social capital, even a small crisis can become existential. I mean, look at the UK, look at Germany, world wars, revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, massive social change, population growth, if we look at the 19th century. So there were so many things that these countries survived and actually ultimately turned into prosperous societies. But the conditions for this are ceasing to exist. We live off a social capital that we built over previous generations, and we are depleting it very rapidly.
But because when I speak to Paul Richards earlier, he's like, this is a problem affecting all the countries in Europe. And I said to him, well, it's not, actually.
Oh, it is not.
It isn't, because it isn't affecting Hungary in the same way. It's not affecting Poland in the same way, because they've taken a very different route. What are they? Is it that when it comes to migrants coming into Europe, they just don't they don't try their luck in Hungary? Because Hungary is still in the Schengen acquis, isn't it? It's still effectively got open road borders to its neighbouring countries, does it not? Why is it that, I mean, I know that Orban has turned around and said we're not going to have the quotients of migrants that the EU want us to, which is what he's being fined for, but they don't seem to have the incoming in the same way. Why do you think that is? Because places like Budapest are beautiful.
Well, let me highlight it with a somewhat even more extreme example. I mean, you have massive migration still from Afghanistan to continental Europe. Now, one would say, why is there not massive Afghan migration to China? They do share a land border with each other. And the reason is you don't get access to an expensive welfare state. You don't get housing in hotels, or I guess now it's going to be army barracks. It is all about the way in which these people are treated. And compared to what they have in their countries of origin, compared to what they get in the countries of destination, Germany, the UK, Austria, I mean, it's just by multiple factors significantly better. And this is there's this weird idea now that is kind of very often said in quote unquote by experts that there is no such thing as pull factors. Of course there are pull factors. If you come to a country and you get in your own language, like basically a manual how to rip off the welfare state, I mean, that simply does not exist in Japan or in China or in Hungary or in Poland for that matter.
Let's talk now about what politically could happen. You're talking about 2026 being the foothills of a revolution. I had helped coordinate, just because I happen to know the guy who now works for him, Jordan Bardella, coming over to the UK recently. A good mate of mine has turned out in his new life to be his economics advisor. And I said, Jordan would like to come over and meet Nigel Farage. And you used to work for Nigel. You've got his number. What can we do about this? And what was the most interesting thing about that meeting was the fact that the two of them agreed that, you know what, if the UK turned boats around, if Jordan Bardella was the president of France, he'd say, fine, you do that and we'll take him back, because that would probably instantaneously stop the trade, because people would no longer accumulate in Calais thinking they can get over to the UK. And to him it just it makes sense, doesn't it? So can we foresee a future in Europe where the populist parties get into power and can begin to cooperate? Because that's what it's going to take to face down the EU, because on their side they seem to rule the roost and demand what goes on, and when it comes to these populist parties, it's always sort of divide and conquer. They don't seem to work together and cooperate in a way that can face down these supranational entities.
Well, let me put it this way. Populism gets you into office, but policies keep you in office. So this is the thing. I like very much the issues on which many of these parties are running, but then they need to deliver. David Betts, right? I think he's now a household name in the UK for very good reasons, but there's a massive expectations gap. And this expectations gap also needs to be closed by these populist parties then. So as much as I would be excited about Bardella, Farage, Alice Weidel, you name it, of them coming into office, they have to deliver, and they have to deliver very, very quickly. Because as I said, the people are upset. I get email after email after email, and I'm sure that you do as well, Alex, where more and more people say elections are just a smokescreen, they don't change everything, every party is part of the uniparty system. So there is a lot of, and justifiably so, by the way, a lot of distrust, a lot of frustration with the current political system. So whoever gets into office must A, show that they're not just in office, they're actually in power, and B, they must from day one start to execute policies, both of a structural but also of a symbolic nature. What I mean with this, people must have a sense that the ship is being turned around. And I think this is very, very difficult. And you see this, by the way, in the United States as well. This is like there was a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning of Donald Trump's second term, but it's ebbing off now, right? You can see how this enthusiasm is gradually declining. In my opinion, that's not so much Trump's fault. It's more the Republican Party's fault, but that's a completely separate discussion. But it's not just the obligation to change policies, but also to lift the spirits of the people again. So this is a Herculean task that I think can be accomplished, but it needs to be more. So it's the boats that you mentioned, visa policies. Right? It cannot be the case that people that no longer come via small boats and just come via student visas, but ultimately the outcome is the same. Remigration in whatever way, shape or form, right? There must be policies that leads to people actually leaving the country. Family reunification, same thing. Family reunification, yes. When people are remigrated, they can take their family with them, but the people who are here can no longer bring them.
Let's talk about remigration, actually, because this is a word that a lot of people are banding about quite frequently now. What we need is remigration, remigration, remigration. My question is, how do you do that? Because unless you want to be a bit like Idi Amin, which I don't think anybody thinks is desirable, do you turn around and just say, right, if you've come to the country in the last 5 years and you're from any of these countries, you've now got to go home? Or, I mean, what would it look like as a policy?
Well, I think the first thing is, which also the more sensible voices in the UK say, right? You start with people that commit crimes. You start with people who are overstaying their visas. You start with people who, let's say, acquired visas by fraudulent means. This would be a bigger case, I think, in Germany than it would be in the UK, but I could imagine that similar things happened there as well. We have people that acquired citizenship through fraudulent documents. We have people that acquired asylum through fraudulent documents. So I would begin with all of this. I mean, this would be the first step. Family reunification. Same thing. I would say, okay, is it really necessary that a sociology student from the Middle East has to bring his aunt, his uncle, and his second cousin? I think that you just change the rules and say, what exactly is the point of them being here? You make rules that say if somebody is here and he's not from, in the case of European Union member states, in the UK it would be different. If somebody is not paying into the government system, if somebody is not paying into contributing to the state, but only taking from it for more than, let's say, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right? Then they get also, a remigration order. I think, I don't like, for historical reasons, the word deportation, but you know what I mean? I think there's a lot that can be done. You're absolutely right. Nobody talks about train cars where people are forced into. It's just you create conditions where, particularly for non-assimilated, non-integrated, non-productive migrants, the conditions will be in such a way that they go back home. By the way, to give a historical example, this is what happened in the 19th century in the United States. Everybody very often talks about Italian migration to the United States, but there was also certain waves of Italian emigration from the United States. I mean, I just picked the Italians as an example. It happened with many groups because they couldn't find work, they couldn't make a living in the US, so they went back to Italy. So this is historically nothing new. I mean, to say one last sentence, if a policy of remigration is not going to be enacted, it will lead to a policy of deportation, because the angrier people get, the more open they will be to ever more radical solutions. Or as somebody who I admire very much, Mark Stein, said, you will reach the point where the good people will no longer be in office because they are not willing to go to the lengths that are going to be necessary. And I don't want to reach that point.
No, that's it. We sort of touched on this yesterday, didn't we? That if you want to radicalise people, they're going about it exactly that way. I tell you what you should do, Ralph, Professor Schollhammer. I think you should write the policy blueprint for remigration that can then be handed out to all the potential future populist leaders of Europe, so they're all singing from the same hymn sheet, and therefore you and you alone can save the West.
But But then, Alex, this. I'm so glad you mentioned this. This is the biggest gaslighting. In most cases, the laws are already on the books. They're not being executed. Like you talk about this very eloquently and justifiably. So somebody who comes from France to the UK has no legal right, if you really take it by the letter of the law, to ask for asylum. They come from a safe state.
Yeah.
They're not persecuted. So it's not, this is the gaslighting by many politicians to say, oh, we don't have the laws. Oh, we don't have the rules. No. You decide not to execute them.
Yeah.
Basically, they're in constant doubling, like all these things that clearly define how asylum is supposed to be treated. They ignore it, create the problem, and then say there's nothing we can do about it. So we have a politician's problem. So, I mean, you know that, but this is, don't, I mean, kind of my voice to the people, if it was this, don't be gaslighted by this. Don't be told there's nothing we can do. There are no laws. It's all there.
Well, stay with me. So I've got a bit of breaking news, and we can do a sort of small, moderate fist pump because it's mildly good.
All right.
Which is that the government of the United Kingdom has announced it will raise the inheritance tax relief threshold for farmers from 1 million to 2.5 million in a climb down following months of protest. They're not getting rid of it altogether, but they have sort of, moved a little bit. So there we go. That is something indeed to cautiously celebrate. It'd be much better if they just got rid of it altogether. And at this point,
Indeed.
They may as well go down that route because according to them, it doesn't raise much for the exchequer anyway. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much, Alex.
We'll catch up again in the very near future and hopefully get back to our good old outfit coordination. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but are you heading home for Christmas? If you are, you'll want to stay tuned because we're joined by the travel guru, Simon Calder, just after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Now, I don't know about you. What kind of skeleton staff in News UK at the moment? I think most people have already broken up for Christmas. It happens when Christmas falls on a Thursday. People go, well, let's not work on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you can't blame them, really. I'm not in that situation, which means that I'm presenting again tomorrow, 10 till 1. I hope you get to join me. But it means that I'm going to have to get from London to the West Country after the show. And I'm going via train, so fingers crossed it's all going to run smoothly. Shall we find out? Because this could be you as well. We're joined now by Simon Calder, travel correspondent for The Independent. Simon, in terms of Christmas travel, have most people done their Christmas travel, or is there going to be a big bottleneck today and tomorrow?
It's going to be really busy today, Alex, particularly on the trains, and tomorrow is going to be very busy on the roads, according to the RAC prediction. But the thing is, it's actually the way that the dates have fallen have been really kind to Christmas travellers like you and me. I'm speaking to you from beautiful Crewe railway station in Cheshire. That's because a lot of people actually last Friday thought, OK, well, finished work, we're going to start the Christmas getaway. And that's actually been continuing pretty much all week. So instead of having a really, just a couple of days of the rush, we've basically got sort of 5 or 6 days. So you should be all right. It depends how you're planning to get to the West Country, because we've got big problems on the link from London Waterloo to Exeter. That's because they've run out of enough trains. On Great Western Railway, things are looking pretty good until you actually get into Cornwall, when some of the branch lines are having a bit of a problem because of flooding. Elsewhere, the big advice is not to put too much faith into cross-country trains. They have basically a shortage of drivers. They've been making dozens of cancellations every day, and they tell me that that is going to continue into tomorrow. And just reminding anybody who's travelling by rail tomorrow, Christmas Eve, things start winding down around about tea time, and therefore you need to be careful if you're starting late in the day that you will actually be able to get to your destination. All trains will be all tucked up by about midnight tomorrow night, and then nothing is going to be moving on the railways until a few services start up on Boxing Day, and on top of that, most will resume on Saturday. But here on the West Coast Main Line, it's going to be very exciting. There's basically work in various locations from Saturday the 27th right through to the middle of January.
Oh, ouch. Someone once told me that GWR per kilometre is the most expensive railway line in Europe, and for that pleasure I get to usually stand up all the way to Reading as well. What are the hotspots going to be like on the roads? Where should people sort of bear in mind if they're going to be driving somewhere? Which particular geographical parts of the UK could end up snarled up?
Oh, OK, and absolutely. GWR, particularly between Didcot Parkway and Swindon, is amazingly expensive.
Oh, I know.
But we haven't got time for that right now. On the roads, it's going to be the usual suspects. So that's the M25 today and possibly tomorrow morning, as all those dads do their last-minute shopping around the Blue Water area in Kent, but also that quadrant from Heathrow and the M4 round to the M1, that's always busy. The M5 is never a delight, running south from both Birmingham towards Bristol and then from Bristol towards the West Country. I expect it to be heavy on the M4 between Bristol and Cardiff, and then further north, well, the M6 we've already heard has problems in Cumbria today, and there will also be a lot of action going on around the M60 in Manchester, particularly the Trafford Centre area. So that's going to be tricky. If you want to have a trouble-free journey, the advice is start before 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's what the RAC says. Today, it's, as it were, already too late unless you wait until tea time to begin your journey. There will be still a fair amount of ordinary commuter and business traffic around today because some people like you and me are still at work.
Oh, we are indeed. Do you know what? I was just listening to you. You've got such a lovely voice, Simon. I was thinking you'd be really good doing the shipping forecast. You should build that into your sort of your travel guru-hood.
Well, that's very nice. So, yes, North Utsira and South Utsira are looking relatively calm at the moment.
Oh, do you know what? That is just beautiful. So mellifluous. Simon, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. It's always a privilege and an honour to have you on the programme. Everyone's favourite travel guru, am I right? OK, now we're going to be taking a break in a short while. But don't go anywhere, because when we come back, I'm going to be joined by Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism UK. We're going to be chewing over all the big political stories, and if you want to add your voice to the conversation, the number is 0344 499 1000. It's your normal network rates. We'll be taking calls at the end of the programme, so do register your interest with Abby now.
Live Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm amazed, actually, my voice has managed to carry this far. I tell you what, it definitely sounds worse than I feel. I don't feel too terrible, but I am at sort of the knife edge of coughing and spluttering at any given time. So do bear with me if I suddenly have to sort of press the button that says cough. Thank God we've got one of those in my little desk in front of me here. I can sort of hit a button and just look like I'm, suffocating in silence. But, you can help me out, like I've said already, by giving me a call, 03444991000. We'll be taking calls at the end of the programme. It'd be great to hear from some of you. And keep your voice notes coming in. We had a brilliant little voice note mega mix earlier, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So you can also use 03444991000 for that as well. And hit that little microphone and lay me down an opinion on WhatsApp. If you'd rather send a text message, 87222 is the number for that. Write the word talk before you message. OK, pleased to say now we're joined by a favourite on this channel, Mr. Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. How are you, Mark?
Very good, Alex. I'm in warm and sunny Tenerife for Christmas, so it's a lot nicer here than it is over there.
Oh, man, I was looking at that. I could see a ceiling fan above your head, and I thought to myself, that can't be in Britain in this weather. Lucky you. How long are you over there for?
Another couple of weeks.
Oh, what? I am now green with envy. I love the Canaries. I think they're massively underrated. I must admit, Lanzarote is my favourite.
I'm yet another person who's fled Starmer's Britain, Alex.
Do you know what I do? When I'm sort of, got nothing to do or sitting in the tub, I go on to all the estate agents in Lanzarote and look how much property prices are there. Because I've got this dream of basically living in the middle of the island in a volcano and just sort of being a hermit away from the world and just hiking and eating really good quality seafood. But unfortunately, the prices in Lanzarote are pretty steep these days, so I think that's going to have to remain a pipe dream unless someone wants to start paying me a bit more money. But I don't think that's going to happen, because if, they pay me more money, I'm just going to be taxed more, because taxes are at an all-time high, because, well, we got to pay for people to stay in army barracks, don't we? I feel tremendously sorry for the people of Crowborough. I was speaking earlier on to former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards, who said, and he couldn't really flesh this out, to be honest, with detail, but he was sort of making this suggestion that army barracks are preferable to hotels because you can enforce the borders, ironically, of army barracks. And when I said to him, well, how's that going to be done, the policing of this, does that mean they're not going to be allowed out and about? He's like, oh, no. Of course they're going to be allowed out and about. They need fresh air. They'll be, all these young men will go tonto if you lock them all up together. And I'm thinking, well, that's the point, isn't it? All these young men could well go tonto out and about on the streets as well. Do you think that we're about to, one of the callers that I had today was talking to me about vigilantes on social media, sort of saying they're going to go over to France and start taking matters into their own hands. Do you think that 2026 could become a year where essentially the public go, we've had enough, that we actually reach breaking point?
Really interesting question, Alex. I mean, there's no doubt that in 2025 the public's had enough. It's just difficult for the public to know what to do, what levers to pull, how to cast their ballot papers in order to try and solve this problem. They've voted for the Conservatives over and over again, who said we cap immigration at tens of thousands. Well, that didn't work. Voted in the Labour Party, who said they were going to smash the gangs. That patently hasn't worked. So I don't want to encourage vigilantism or anything against the law. Of course not, but you can understand the incredible frustration that it just doesn't seem anyone in government is capable or perhaps even willing to grasp this problem. And I've seen some of the statements today from the Labour government around this barracks and the wider issue, that there's no silver bullet, they say. Well, actually, there's quite a few silver bullets, actually, quite a few, or if not silver bullets, at least a whole armoury of bronze bullets that you could fire. We've got to radically shorten the asylum process. So the presumption is we're saying no to an asylum seeker unless they adduce enormous evidence to persuade us beyond reasonable doubt that they have a proper asylum claim, and the burden should be on them. We need to get those decisions down from 18 months to about 18 days, I would suggest, to reach a verdict, limit the rights of appeal, pull ourselves out of any international treaties or obligations that we have that might stand in the way of that. So we need to end lawfare. We need a less generous settlement. We should be utterly humane, of course, but we need a less generous settlement to those who are waiting for their applications to be processed than we have at the moment. 4-star hotels in Canary Wharf should not be on the menu. To that extent, you might argue a military barracks is a bit more of a deterrent. But these people are often coming from sleeping under a tree in Calais, so it's not obvious to me that you need to provide them with an enormous amount more than that.
There's someone in a WhatsApp group that I'm in who has great in-depth knowledge of the standards of accommodation at military barracks in her neck of the woods. And she was basically saying, my gosh, they've got everything. They have visiting entertainers, they have this, they have that, they have karaoke nights. She was basically suggesting it sounds like Butlins rather than barracks.
Yeah, well, I think that's sort of part of the problem, isn't it? That although they're not terribly expensive necessarily in terms of total government expenditure, all the bells and whistles that seem to be added, and only when they're publicly exposed does the government get on top of them. High-end dentistry that's beyond the capabilities of most of the British population provided for asylum seekers. Stories of, video games being provided, all of the rest of it, yoga classes, Pilates lessons, all of the sort of things that regular Brits have to pay for themselves. And these are only stamped down on when the light of publicity is shone upon them. So the system is completely and utterly out of control at the moment. And I think it sounds perhaps a little bit inhuman to use these sort of rather brutal terms, but I think we've got to look at the problem in two different ways. There's a stock problem. That's to say, the people who are already here, some of whom need to be, removed because they're illegally melded in with the population, others who are pending and waiting for their application to be processed. Whole bunch of people, perhaps a million or more people in Britain illegally. That's a problem of stock. And then there's a flow problem of the number of people coming over the channel each year or getting into the United Kingdom by other routes. And we seem at the moment completely incapable of solving either. I think you've got to be very, very clear on the flow. That then makes the stock less of an issue. I mean, it's ludicrous that we need 40,000 or more hotel places while we're processing applications. The system has got utterly and completely out of control. So we need to be harsher without being inhumane. We need to stop the pull factor that makes it so unbelievably attractive for people to get here. And part of that, a big part of that, is if they calculate the odds of the likelihood that they can stay or just disappear into the system, once they've rationally calculated their odds, why not get on a small boat and pull the lever and see whether you win?
Would it not serve as a deterrent if, when people were put in army barracks, they weren't allowed off-site? At the very least, they should face a curfew. We should know where they are and where they're going, and everyone, the amount of people who just disappear from these hotels, it's at least, I've heard from someone inside it, it's at least one a day. It's just disappearing into the ether. Why on earth are we not saying, right, you've got food, you've got shelter, but you ain't leaving this site. Here's a playing field. You can go and kick a football around in, but actually, otherwise, that's all you're getting, because it seems to me that would sort of travel quite quickly. News of a lack of freedom would probably run amok on the social media sites, and you might suddenly find demand starts to drop. I don't understand why the government don't take that particular measure.
I completely agree with you, Alex, and it's also worth adding that those who are likely to, if you like, disappear into wider society, just walk out of whatever accommodation they're in, never to be seen again by the authorities, are presumably those who are reaching the end of the process and suspect that their application will be refused. At that point, you might as well just walk out and try and find some way of living in the grey or black market economy. So, yeah, I'm wholly with you. You've got to change the odds. You've got to change the circumstances. We've got to track people. I would go further as well, which again would require us to deviate from a number of international arrangements. But I'm all in favour of doing that as needs must. That if you arrive here illegally, we will not entertain your application, however strong it is, for asylum seeking or indeed for regular migration. If you just want to come here to work, if you've entered the country illegally, your case will not be heard. That should put a stop to the small boats almost immediately. We would deport and detain immediately on arrival. Nobody would be able to reach for the asylum word, which then triggers an unbelievably lengthy process in which the deck is loaded in favour of the asylum seeker. All of that needs to end, and I think the Labour government just doesn't have the will, possibly not the support on its backbenches to even begin to tackle it. So I suspect we'll get a lot of window dressing. Let's use barracks rather than hotels, for example. We'll get window dressing, but no more. And the problem will probably get worse over the next year or two.
Do I used to be of the mindset where I used to think all these people who say refugees welcome, we should go stick the asylum seekers down their streets and in their communities, see how they feel. Because they tend to be from the sort of leafy, untouched areas where this isn't a problem for them. But then I kind of decided, well, that's not good, because that's just spreading the problem even further. It's actually sort of, what's the best term I can use? It's affecting even more corners of the country, probably irreversibly. But it seems to me that that's exactly what this army barracks approach is going to do, because most army barracks tend to be nestled away in the sort of non-urban parts of the United Kingdom, places that are surrounded by idyllic little villages. And I've read a report about how many potential unused barracks there are in Wiltshire alone, and Wiltshire's a gorgeous little shire. It looks like something from J.R. Tolkien, and it would break my heart to see those beautiful parts of real Britain and the little villages, the gorgeous little picturesque thatched cottage villages, suddenly being inundated with this problem.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, two thoughts there, Alex. Firstly, look, I totally understand the local community being up in arms about this wherever. if they're going to be treated as a dumping ground for those seeking asylum, whether it's barracks or a hotel. I totally understand that. You might just be able to assuage their fears if you had a serious plan and commitment that it would be strictly time limited. That, you know, terribly sorry, we're working through the backlog. We're going to need to use this barracks for, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, not a day longer. We promise to police it properly for that time. Sorry for the inconvenience over the next 3, 4 or 5 months. Perhaps the local community would sort of bite the bullet on that and begrudgingly accept it. But I think locals are right in all of these areas that there's no end in sight, that you don't believe that it would be a short-term inconvenience. You think it's likely to become a permanent feature of your landscape. And as for the refugees welcome people, well, I mean, I'm rather with the MP Rupert Lowe, who suggested on this, why don't we have a system in which you take responsibility for the refugee or asylum seeker you're housing, you put them up in your spare room, you're responsible for their behaviour. If they do anything wrong, we'll come after you for it. And let's see how many people offer their spare bedroom in their leafy suburbs. So there's an awful lot of refugees welcome in general, but I think if you ask people specifically, they rather turn off the idea. So I wouldn't mind launching that scheme, not on the grounds that it would work, but on the grounds that it would flush out those who I think are virtue signalling rather than genuinely suggesting they would turn over a part of their own house to solve the problem.
I signed up to one of those NGOs which encourages people to take refugees into their house to see the sort of, the sort of system that they have. And they fire out emails going, does anyone want to have this person? Does anyone want to have this person? And none of them are the sort of people that I'd feel comfortable living with me, because all of them are fighting age males. That's the point. Let's talk now about infrastructure, because the Labour Party came in, all guns blazing, saying there's going to be 150 big infrastructure projects. They're going to rip up planning and development regulation in order to get all these things done. But basically, it's just not happening. More than half of planning decisions on 27 major projects expected in 2025 were delayed beyond the 3-month decision period for ministers. That's according to the Centre for Policy Studies. What are the biggest obstacles, the biggest hurdles towards getting things done in the United Kingdom? I saw a brilliant video by Robert Jenrick on social media where he's talking about the fact there's 400 quangos who essentially sort of stymie any decision making. Is that at the root of all of this?
That is a part of the problem. So if you're trying to build anything or create anything, there are endless hoops for you to jump through. You know, does this potentially endanger the lesser spotted newt? You know, you'll remember infamously, Alex, that on HS2, I mean, not a project I think we should have been engaged in, but if you are going to engage in it, why the hell should a quango be able to insist that you build a bat tunnel along the railway at the cost of £500,000 per bat saved? I mean, it becomes ludicrous and impossible to do any sort of commercial business. So Robert is right that having all of these arm's length so-called independent, which basically means unelected and unaccountable bodies, gumming up the whole process, whether it's about, you know, wildlife or the environment or a whole range of other things, we are over cautious on all of that. We still have very strict planning rules, which I think we need to relax. But the heart of it for me on building stuff, whether this is homes or airport expansion, which we've been hopeless at. We haven't improved airport capacity in terms of runways in the southeast since the end of the Second World War. I mean, this is absolutely ludicrous if you think how ubiquitous aviation has become since then. So we need more relaxed planning laws. But alongside that, I think we've got to allow the market to do its business. The problem at the moment is that it's very difficult to make a financial compensation offer to the local community. So we're all encouraged to be NIMBYs, because who wants a busy railway line running past their house, or yet more planes flying overhead, or lots of bulldozers around while something new is built, or much more houses where there's presently parkland? You need to allow into the planning system the ability for the developers to make a financial compensation offer to the local community. And then you're just haggling about price. You know, how much should those who live near Heathrow Airport be compensated for the potential additional noise and disruption? But you can make a cash offer for that. You can reach an agreement, you can shake hands on it, and you can get things built. But at the moment, we just put up the local population in any area and the quangos against the developers, and it becomes a lobbying process, typically then ends up in court, and court takes forever. So I say actually marketise the planning process, compensate people for inconvenience, and let them decide. If they don't want any of the local green area built on, fine, but then they won't get any compensation. It could be, for example, an offer to reduce your council tax bill paid for by the developer. So let's get money into the system rather than just haggling and lobbying. That's what's gumming the whole process up.
Interesting. Where I was brought up, my parents still live in the same house that I was brought up in. And when I was brought up, we were in a sort of 1970s housing estate, but it was the final frontier before the countryside. So my brother and I used to go on really long bike rides. It was basically, you know, our little suburb on the outskirts of Gloucester and then nothing. And now it's astonishing. They basically live in the middle of a housing estate because they've built even more housing estates. And when I was going to see my parents at the weekend, I was driving down the road, I was like, oh my goodness, they're even building on the fields just over the road. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. Mark, thank you ever so much. It's always lovely catching up with you, my darling. Right, OK, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere. And if you want to get in touch, you know what the number is by now. Surely, if you don't, this is your reminder, 03 444 99 1000. It's your normal network rate to register your interest to have a chit-chat with me, because we will be taking your calls at the end of the programme. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed, you can text me on 87222, write the word talk for your text. And if you want to leave me a voice note, go ahead and do that, because I always love those. OK, we're taking a short break now, and we're joined after that by Conservative big cheese Sir John Redwood.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. I just want to make an apology to you. If you're like, we keep messaging that blimmin' woman and she's not reading them out. I've had a bug in my system. Well, basically, I just needed to press the refresh button because it's all sort of wired into the internet or something. But I am a complete Luddite and a technophobe. And so wonderfully, Jodie's just come in and sort of gone, you've got loads of messages in there, Alex. Anyway, let's do some of those now, shall we? As I've been remiss up until now. And I can use this as a nice little platform to jump into our next segment. Daryl in Blackburn says, on Streeting wanting to rejoin the EU, the reason Labour want to rejoin is the fact that they need the EU to govern, as they have no clue how to. It's a lot easier for Labour to absolve any blame for themselves for any rules and regulations that they have to follow. It's true, isn't it? You know, so it's like, oh, well, international law. And Gay in Bolden says, as the EU is on the verge of collapse with the French and Germans wanting out, Streeting thinks it's a good idea for closer ties. That's just the sort of leadership this country needs. Not on that topic. Let's discuss Wes Streeting's intimations that we might go back into a customs union with veteran Brexiteer Sir John Redwood. Good afternoon to you, John.
Hello, Alex, and hello, everybody.
Hello, John. By the way, did you know there's a pub just over the way called the Redwood, and I always refer to it as the Sir John. So next time you're in the studios, I'll take you for a pint there in your honour.
Well, I'm very honoured, and I was pleased to be promoted to Big Cheese in your running.
Big Cheese, the biggest. You're like the single Gloucester that goes down Cooper's Hill every May Day bank holiday.
Made my Christmas then.
Oh. Do you know what's going to make your Christmas even more? Getting back into the customs union, not. I mean, they just won't leave this alone, will they? I can see absolutely zero advantage to going back into the customs union, particularly now as we've started to make trade deals. But it seems to me the Labour Party are incrementally dragging us back into all sorts of things, something that hasn't really been spoken about. We know that we're back into Erasmus, which is ridiculous because the Turing scheme was set up just for British students able to go to any universities. They all wanted to go to the ones in the Anglosphere because we don't have foreign languages. That's essentially writing a cheque so EU students can come to our brilliant universities for free. But we're not talking about the fact that there's conversations about taking us back into the common energy market as well. We're basically going to end up back in, aren't we? But, you know, not on paper.
Well, it's going to be an even worse deal than we had before because they want to give everything to the EU and nothing to us. And as you've summed it up so brilliantly, why help a whole load of EU students to come here with our taxpayers' money and stifle the opportunities of our students to go anywhere in the world that they want to go? Why are they so narrow? Why aren't they more global? The customs union is a particularly bad idea. If you ask them, do they like more tariffs? They say, no, they don't think the tariffs are a good idea, particularly if Trump's imposing them. But joining a customs union is about sticking more tariffs on. We'd just taken tariffs off a whole load of things when we got out of the EU. We'd have to put all those tariffs back on. And those are tariffs on things which we can't make or grow for ourselves. It just makes things dearer and wrecks our cost of living again. So that's particularly mad. As you rightly say, we've had to tear up all those trade deals we've done with the rest of the world, which were better than the terms that the EU got, or were terms that the EU didn't even try to get because they didn't have trade deals with those places. So why wreck our non-EU trade, which is what a customs union would be all about doing, when that is the biggest part of our trade, the fastest growing part of our trade, the most successful part of our trade?
What is so staggering, though, I mean, for me, is, you know, if anyone's paying any attention to what's going on inside the EU, the farmers ain't happy at all. There have been massive protests recently in Brussels, largely down to the pact that they want to make with Mercosur, the South American group of nations. And what is so staggering is, you know, countries in Europe are saying to their cattle farmers, you're going to have to kill all your cows because they fart too much to save the planet. But don't worry, we're going to import a load of cheaper Brazilian beef where they actually cut down the Amazon rainforest to graze the cattle, for crying out loud. Does Wes Streeting not have any idea? Does he not open a newspaper? Does he not have any idea what is going on in Europe and what rejoining the customs union would end up looking like? Because we'd be dragged into all of that.
No, well, if you or I make a comment about Europe and point out some of the facts, we're told we're negative or we're fibbing or whatever. They don't want to know the awful reality about why Europe has slow growth, high taxes, and over-regulates everything in sight. And Wes Streeting, I think, was just trying to find a way of differentiating himself from his boss, Keir Starmer, because he obviously wants Keir Starmer's job. And he latched on to the fact that quite a lot of Labour key supporters would like more Europe. So he said, well, why don't we join the customs union? I don't think any of them who want to join the customs union know what a customs union is. or understand what it would cost us or why we'd have to put tariffs on. They muddle it up with the single market because they say, oh, we want to get rid of some of the friction in our trade with Europe. Well, we got rid of all the tariff friction with Europe because we have a free trade agreement with them. So it's really nothing to do with tariffs. The frictions are EU laws. And if you join the single market, you'd have even more of those, not less. But at least you would be addressing the issue of non-tariff barriers if you were talking about the single market, whereas they talk about the customs union, which has nothing to do with that.
No, it's amazing, actually. I noticed this during Brexit. You can sort of go and ask anybody, even the top journalists, opining about how dreadful and what a disaster it's going to be if we leave the EU. And if you said to them, do you know what the triumvirate system is of the EU? Can you name the three main institutions of the EU? They can't do it.
No, they
actually don't know.
I remember one of my speeches in the referendum campaign, I set out what the EU is about. And they started shouting at me and saying, don't lie, and it isn't like that at all. And I said, so far, all I've done is quoted from the treaty.
I remember.
They didn't know their own treaty, you know?
It's madness.
It's what you're asking us to stay in. It's a dreadful treaty. Why don't you read it sometime?
I can remember having an infamous debate with Alistair Campbell on Newsnight, and I was basically saying, look, that the European Parliament has zero powers. All these decisions are taken that then have to be imposed in UK law without any scrutiny, accountability. And he was trying to tell me, no, we don't have to take any of it if we don't want to. I was like, what? What world do you live on? Madness, these people.
They just fib the whole time. It's like this nonsense that we've lost 4%, or is it 8%, depending on which one you listen to, of all our GDP since we left the EU. Well, that isn't on the graphs and charts. Our GDP has done considerably better than Germany's. So there's no obvious Brexit effect whatsoever. And yet they just keep on trotting it out as if it were true and it was somebody's forecast that went wrong many years ago.
Actually, maybe we should let them drag us back into Europe, because then Rachel Reeves wouldn't have a leg to stand on, because she wouldn't be able to blame crashing the economy on Brexit at all, would she? Because, we are in an absolutely dreadful state when it comes to the fact that household disposable income is the lowest level it's been since before the pandemic, after repeated tax rates. Do you think basically what's happened is we've hit that top of the Laffer curve and we're like rolling down like a snowball in the Alps?
Yeah, well, of course we are. And again, they don't seem to understand the Laffer curve. They don't understand that if you put taxes up too much, the people with the money leave, or they get better lawyers and accountants, or they do less. They work less hard, because if you're well off, you don't have to do all these extra things. So why bother if you're going to be taxed to death and blamed and criticised for daring to do it? And that's the effect they've now got. They've got the effect that people of talent and people with money either leave the country or do less, because they just don't think it's worthwhile. They're being clobbered and blamed the whole time.
No, indeed, and there doesn't seem to be much light at the end of the bat tunnel when it comes to our economy. And talking about bat tunnels, it seems that all the big promises the Labour Party made about infrastructure, well, they're not really being realised. They said they were going to cut down on planning regulations. They were going to there was sort of tough fighting talk, wasn't it? We're going to steamroll this stuff through, whether people like it or not. We're going to build all these houses and we're going to ignore all the NIMBYs. So far, they're not able to do any of it, it seems.
No, well, again, they didn't understand how the world works. It wasn't about a shortage of planning permissions for houses. There were hundreds of thousands of permissions out there. There wasn't enough building going on because the economy wasn't strong enough. And they then decided to weaken the economy. And because they borrowed so much and taxed so much, they're actually having to pay more in interest charges for the government now than was happening under the previous government. And that's had a knock-on to mortgages. And so people can't afford to buy the homes, so then the builders don't build the homes. And so there's been a collapse in building instead of a growth in building at the very time when Angela Rayner and her successor were saying, well, of course, I'm going to cut through it all with this sword of growth I've got. Well, the sword's blunt, or it's knocking the wrong things down.
Do you reckon they're going to last the full term?
Well, I don't think this particular group will. I think there will be need for considerable changes at the top. I fear they're going to go on for as long as they can, because they've got a huge majority. Pity they don't know what to do with it, or they now want to do a lot of things with it they didn't tell us about, which make our lives worse and damage our economy. They're the anti-growth party, and they're meant to be the pro-growth party.
How are they're getting away as well with persistently cancelling elections. 3 lots of elections now. And actually on that topic, it must frustrate you because you're always extremely loyal to the Conservative Party. That Kemi Badenoch's come out talking the talk about it's atrocious that they're delaying or cancelling elections, except a significant number of the councils taking up the offer to defer having a ballot are Conservative-led. Surely your party should have turned around and said to their Conservative-run councils, don't accept the offer, have the elections, come what may, because this is the line we're going to be putting out.
Well, I agree with Kemi. I agree with what you just said, that definitely we should hold those elections, and I would urge all Conservative leaders who are in a position to do so to say they want the elections to go ahead. It's a great pity if they don't. But in a democratic party like the Conservative Party, the leader can't make a decision for a county council leader that county council leader is empowered to make. And so all we can do is lecture them and argue with them that they really ought to do the decent thing because there need to be elections.
John, it's been fantastic catching up with you. And just to let you know, when we do go for our pint at the Sir John, it's a big, bustling sports bar with multiple lagers, massive screens, packed full of Millwall fans and very loud music. It'll be right up your street.
Well, let's see how that works out, Alex.
Honestly, at some point,
Have a lovely Christmas.
it's got to happen. Merry Christmas to you. It's always wonderful having you on the programme. Right, OK, we're going to take a short break now. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about, well, the Democrats getting involved with all these Epstein files. More and more of them are being published. And the sort of interesting approach of Donald Trump, who's sort of come out in quite robust defence of Clinton when it comes to his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to be finding out a bit more about that after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, hello. Sorry about that. I was not paying attention at all. You caught me in the act of looking at my phone. I'm sorry. Right, now, talking about being caught in the act. Look, ever the professional, I know how to do a segue at least. Clinton seems to be caught in the act quite a bit when it comes to these Epstein files, especially when it comes to being in hot tubs. You would think that Donald Trump would take the opportunity to really drive the knife in, the metaphorical knife that is, given how much he doesn't seem to enjoy the company of crooked Hillary, Bill Clinton's wife. And yet, quite astonishingly, he's defended Bill Clinton. Why is he doing this? He said, I don't like the pictures of Bill Clinton being shown. I don't like the pictures of other people being shown. I think it's a terrible thing. What's going on? Let's speak to Laurie Laird, who's a US political commentator. Hello there, Laurie.
Hello, Alex. Looking at your phone, you're like my kids at the dinner table.
I couldn't help it. I just, feel like this is the problem, right? Three hours on air, and you get out the other side, and you've got about 80,562 WhatsApps to contend with. And my neighbour's messaging me, says all this drama going on my street. I got the decorator in. She's been checking if he's painting my walls the right colour. There's things I've got to monitor. So there I was.
No time for work.
Happy. I mean, I could just leave you to crack on. Tell the audience what's going on, and I'll make sure my room's being painted correctly. Donald Trump's approach, it doesn't. From an outsider's perspective, he's sort of, look, I'm minded to agree with Donald Trump about the publication of all of this stuff. It's just besmirching everybody. Epstein was clearly a horrible and wicked man. It's now being used to political point score. No one seems to care about the victims in all of this anymore, which is pretty crass and unbecoming. But the American public have got their knickers in a twist about this. And, from an outsider's perspective, when I look at this, everyone seemed to go to Epstein Island. In fact, if you're not on the list, you don't seem to be a very important person. But I can't see how it works in Trump's favour to come out and say as such. What's he up to?
Well, it is difficult. And when I saw those comments, I thought, what? And, I think that to start with, we probably should stop being surprised when Donald Trump changes his opinion on something. I mean, the man has shown an extraordinary flexibility with some of his opinions, but you have to wonder, and this is speculation, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but when Donald Trump said, look, reputations are being besmirched and, Bill Clinton can, take care of himself, we didn't know when he said that a whole nother batch of files was going to be released today. And one of the things that we have seen today is a letter from the Department of Justice when Trump was president the first time, saying that Trump had been a passenger on Epstein's plane more often than was previously thought. He was listed as a passenger 8 times. This is not any indication of wrongdoing whatsoever. If Epstein and Trump had not met, given the social circles they moved in New York and in South Florida, that would have been more remarkable than the fact that they had an acquaintanceship. But the fact that Trump had ridden on that plane, and this was something that was flagged by his own Department of Justice in 2020, that may be why Donald Trump is backing off the Clintons a little bit. Now, I am putting 2 and 2 together here and may not be accurately getting 4. I think that the point that you have made about reputations being besmirched is a valid one, but I also think, let's take the politics out of there. A lot of very powerful people, mostly men, were aware that something was wrong with Jeffrey Epstein. The plane was called the Lolita Express. A lot of people that had a lot of power looked the other way. And I think this needs to be looked at, not through a political lens, but who knew what in terms of law enforcement when the DOJ first became aware of allegations against Epstein in the mid-1990s. So that means departments of justice of both, appointed by both political parties, looked at this case, decided in the mid-90s or late 90s that this was not a federal case. I think it's time to learn the thinking. Why was this not a federal case? When he was convicted in 2008, those were state charges. He got off incredibly lightly. Why were federal charges not pursued? This isn't a political issue. This is a legal issue, and I think at this point, we should probably know more about it.
I mean, do you think, essentially, that it was because so many powerful people had done, as you said, got on that aeroplane, turned a blind eye? I mean, come on, we've seen the photographs of all the decor in that house. It was very clear. You'd have to be blind to not have a sense of what was taking place.
Do you not think, for a guy who had all this money, do you not think his taste in interiors was like a low-budget Airbnb?
Do you know what? I really thought that. There was one room of this pink room. I don't know why it was there involved in the slides, unless it was to show you how rubbish his decorating was.
Honestly,
because it did look really naff.
I'm missing the point. I know, but you look at it and you think, seriously? I've been in Airbnbs that I thought were much nicer done than that. But I think this is who looked the other way and why. I mean, we have Larry Summers, who was a head of Harvard University, served in the Obama administration, really well-respected economist, sending emails to Epstein looking for advice on how to seduce one of his students. right? I mean, this is sort of, the best and the brightest, in the American political system. So I agree with you. So many people seem to have been linked to Epstein and turned the other way. This is incredibly concerning.
Why was he? How did he do this? How did he have such a hold over people?
Okay, Alex, this is something, again, I'd like to have explained. He got his start as a supply teacher at an incredibly posh secondary school in New York City. And one of the parents came up and said, hey, you'd be good in finance. How he made that leap to becoming incredibly wealthy, owning his own plane and his own island, that's never been entirely clear to me. I'd love to know more about that.
There's plenty of conspiracy theorists surrounding that, particularly that he might have essentially been a foreign agent there to
I know,
blackmail.
I've seen that around. But there's something else that worries me about this. So I mentioned that, it looks like federal investigators of both stripes. And we like to, in America, we like to think of prosecutors and public defenders being apolitical, but they are appointed by political parties. You can't get away from that. But I'd really like to see the thinking in not charging this guy. The other thing that's really worrying me about this, Alex, is the staggered release of the documentation. Now, by law, a law passed by a Republican majority Congress, signed by a Republican president, all of that documentation was meant to be in the public domain by midnight U.S. time on Friday. The DOJ, the Department of Justice, says, well, we couldn't comply with that. You're going to get it when you get it. This is not following the law. That may not be all that relevant, but what's bothering me a lot is the fact that the law is not being followed, and we're now learning that Congress, which passed this law, doesn't really have any recourse to enforce this law that they passed. That's not party political, because at some point the other guys are going to be in charge. And if there's an erosion of legal norms and the Congress cannot hold your Department of Justice to account, it doesn't matter who's in power, that erosion of legal norms is extremely concerning to me.
There's been some pretty troubling releases relating to the royal family. In particular, an email sent by the letter A, at Balmoral, asking Ghislaine Maxwell whether she had any new inappropriate friends. The email was released in the latest tranche of Jeffrey Epstein documents, was sent in August 2001 and signed off as A, kiss, kiss, kiss. It said, I'm up here at Balmoral summer camp for the royal family. They described themselves as totally exhausted, asked Epstein how Maxwell is doing, and then wrote, how's LA? Have you found me some new inappropriate friends? Let me know when you are coming over, as I'm free from the 25th of August until the 2nd of September and want to go somewhere hot and sunny with some fun people before having to put my nose firmly to the grindstone for the fall. Any ideas gratefully received. Now, it's not been verified whether the email was sent by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, but we have to assume it is. That's a pretty big...
Yeah, Alex, somehow, and I'm happy to say I had missed that one, but I wanted to put my head in my hands when you were reading that out. I don't know how much further Andrew Mountbatten Windsor can possibly fall. And as you say, we do not know whether that was from him. It's going to be hard to live down the photograph of him lying with that wolfish grin with on the laps of a group of what we would assume to be young women. Their faces were all redacted. I don't know how much further he can fall and what should happen with him. It must be absolutely dreadful, for the rest of the royal family to wait for revelations to come out. They must be thinking, what next?
Yeah, I mean, the Telegraph has not verified whether the email was sent by Andrew, but of course I think people are going to put two and two together. And that's incredibly, not just embarrassing, that's, I would say, quite catastrophic. And then I want to get your thoughts on this as well, because Epstein's brother, Mark Epstein, has reaffirmed that he believes his brother did not die by suicide, but was murdered in prison, and has hinted that it may have been Donald Trump and his administration behind it.
Wow. This is such a difficult one for Donald Trump because some of those conspiracy theorists make up a very influential part of the MAGA base. And some of these people, the QAnon theory with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, previously a big Trump supporter, not so much anymore. This feeds into this sort of fringe grouping, yet an influential grouping of conspiracy theorists who have helped propel Donald Trump into the mainstream. They're not necessarily Republicans, but Donald Trump has always had this ability to tap into people's grievances, including grievances of people who are conspiracy theorists. If Donald Trump does not dance to those tunes, it's difficult to see how much longer he can remain as popular as he is. I'm really surprised, Alex, over the past, say, month or so, how Donald Trump seems to have lost touch with that ability to tap into people's grievances, not just with the Epstein issue, but also with things like the cost of living, when he will tell people that the cost of living is a hoax and really things aren't getting more expensive. You just, telling people they can't believe their eyes when they get their shopping bills. This is unusual for Trump. This has been his political gift, to be able to tap into that. And he doesn't seem to be getting it right now. Whether this is a temporary blip or something else is going on is an open question. The guy needs a political break if he's going to retain that sort of, leadership that he's been able to. He looks at sea at the moment.
Do you think the worst is yet to come with these Epstein files?
I think probably my sense would be that if there was something incredibly incriminating between Trump and Epstein, that it probably would have surfaced by now.
Yeah,
Trump's a really high-profile guy. If there was something really bad out there, I suspect we would have seen it. Trump says that they fell out in the early 2000s. There's no evidence to suggest otherwise on that. There's no photographs of the two of them together after that time. But Trump has also been on record in an interview saying, Jeffrey Epstein, like many men, likes women, but Mr. Epstein likes them a little younger. So how much was Donald Trump involved in any skullduggery? There's no evidence to suggest that. But like many, many people, did he have a sense of what may have been going on? That's an open question.
Yeah, it's certainly keeping us all sort of perversely titillated. Laurie, thank you ever so much for coming on.
Good to see you, Alex.
Right, final break, and then it's your calls and messages. So 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial if you'd like to have a chat. I'm back after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Let's get to the phone, shall we? This is Roy, who's a new caller. Excellent. Hello, Roy.
Good afternoon, Alex. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you for calling. Welcome aboard.
Right, well, obviously, I'm talking about your guest, Paul Richards, a couple of hours ago, and he was talking about Crowborough.
Yes.
And, well, I've just looked up Crowborough, and it says it's rich in natural beauty and cultural heritage. Crowborough offers residents a perfect blend of tranquility and community spirit. Well, I think all that's going to change, don't you?
Well, no, exactly. And this is what I was saying earlier about, I sort of spitefully at one point said, oh, we should send these migrants to the places that don't have them. Then they'll know what it's like. All these sort of leftists who say refugees are welcome. But then I sort of, came to my senses when I suddenly realised that would be sending them to where I've just moved to. But then I sort of thought we don't actually want to see the problem spread. And my big concern is this, that army barracks, if the army barracks were used as a sort of fortress, for want of a better word, I think people would find that a lot more acceptable. But a lot of army barracks are based in rural areas. They're not in the middle of city centres, and they're not in sort of urban sprawls. They tend to be out in the countryside and surrounded by quaint little villages. And so you who I think would be sort of even more impacted by all of these men coming in, because there's one thing about a big multicultural city subsuming 540 new arrivals. It's quite another for a little village of about 1,000 people suddenly finding that half their population is coming in from further afield. I think it would be absolutely devastating for certain counties.
Well, having a look at what I've just told you about, and I'm seeing that there's, as you're saying, there's just over, what they say, there's 21,000. I don't believe that for 1 minute, that's going to be in Crowborough. But you mentioned again to this rather strange Paul Richards, who's welcoming them all, probably doesn't live there. But one of the things you mentioned is that the idea of army barracks is that they've got high fences. And like you, I'm thinking high fences means they cannot get out. Yeah. Oh, no. Let them wander.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, he even said, and I'm always very grateful for Paul coming on and batting for the left of politics. He doesn't always agree with what the Labour Party is doing, but he is suggesting, no, things are going to be very well policed, and I sort of challenged him over this, and it sort of transpired he was thinking more in lines of policing the locals to make sure they didn't kick off, and I'm like, oh, no.
Well, again, with the police, if they're policing these, I call them invaders, if they're policing these, then the police area that they move from is then not policed. And you just think everything seems to be, we will protect them, not the general public.
No, exactly. It is madness. It's topsy-turvy logic. Roy, thank you ever so much for calling, and thank you for making it to your maiden call as well. Let's do some messages now before I go off air. This is a lovely one. Ash in Slough says, can I thank you and all the presenters, the guests, the contributors, the backroom and production staff, yes to them, and most importantly, the callers. Special mentions to the Epsom twins, Dan and Chris and Georgina, Chris and Cheshire, Pav from Harrow, to name a few. You are the resistance to tyranny and the defenders of democracy. May you all have a merry and peaceful Christmas, and let's hope for a miracle in 2026. What a lovely sentiment that is. Bill in Fleet says, my statement on men is 100% spot on. I was basically saying, can we make men great again? Can men be men again and stop being Peter Pan little boys who are allergic to responsibility, but see it as the fulfilment of their incredible potential to be be fathers and husbands, because I think that is the main issue when it comes to our plummeting birth rates. It ain't not being able to buy a house. I really don't believe it would help to be able to buy a house, but I don't think people are going, oh, well, can't have a child because I can't buy a house, when the birth rate in poor countries is skyrocketing. Yes, women are going to work, and there are women saying, how do I juggle all of this? That has had an impact. But I honestly believe that the main reason why the birth rate's plummeted is because men just don't want to get involved with it anymore. They don't have to. They can swipe left, they can swipe right, they can look at naughty videos online. They don't have to grow up. Good morning, Alex. Can I say the buck also starts with the government, as well as stopping with it? If they continue to sit on the sidelines, somebody has to start to protect our country. That's Steve listening in Andalusia.